Jiang Haoyi was just an ordinary 19-year-old high school student. His school life was simple. Wake up in the morning, head to school, and that was it. Haoyi liked living this way, a peaceful life where no one paid him much attention. It felt free and calm, and he thought it would be enough if things stayed like that forever. One day, while Haoyi was in class studying, a beautiful girl suddenly entered his classroom. Her name was Zitao. The male students were shocked by her unexpected appearance. Everyone wondered why Zitao had come to their class and couldn't help but admire her figure. Out of nowhere, Zitao grabbed Haoyi's hand while he was daydreaming. Haoyi was stunned and couldn't understand why Zitao was holding his hand. To his surprise, Zitao looked embarrassed. She placed Haoyi's hand on her stomach and declared that she was pregnant with his baby. Haoyi was dumbfounded. He couldn't comprehend what Zitao was saying. His classmates immediately erupted in anger, shocked that someone like Haoyi could have wronged a girl like Zitao. Cameras flashed as they took pictures of him, and some even called him a scumbag. Everyone was in disbelief that Haoyi could do something so outrageous. Zitao claimed that Haoyi's baby in her belly was already 3 months old and asked if he could feel it when he touched her stomach. Furious, Haoyi told her to stop talking as if it were true. He demanded to know who she really was and why she was claiming to be pregnant with his child since he didn't even know her. His classmates didn't believe his protests. They were livid and even threatened him. Desperate, Haoyi pleaded for a chance to explain, but Zitao cut him off. She told him there was no need to explain anything because she and their baby trusted him. Frustrated, Haoyi grabbed Zitao's hand and dragged her out, telling her they needed to talk somewhere else. News about Zitao's pregnancy quickly spread online, and Haoyi became the center of everyone's ridicule. Wherever he went, people followed him, calling him names and shouting insults. Haoyi had to hide just to get away from all the chaos. While he was hiding, Zitao suddenly appeared in front of him with a smile. She teased him, saying the baby in her belly told her that Haoyi's legs were short and he ran too slowly. She even warned him to be careful around her. Exhausted, Haoyi begged her to stop with the nonsense. That same day, the school broadcast system called for Haoyi to report to the teacher's office immediately. Feeling like he was in serious trouble, Haoyi told Zitao to wait for him on the rooftop. As he ran to the office, his classmates swarmed him, chasing him down the hallway. Strangely, Zitao watched from afar and thought Haoyi looked incredibly cool while being pursued. The students continued their chase, throwing objects at him to try and stop him. Confused about why they wouldn't let up, Haoyi spotted the janitor's cleaning supplies. Without hesitation, he grabbed a mop and stood his ground. The students laughed, mocking him for holding nothing but a mop handle. However, Haoyi threw the handle, knocking down several students in one hit. They groaned in pain, shocked by the unexpected attack. Haoyi argued that he was forced to do it since they wouldn't leave him alone. Suddenly, someone pulled him into the girls' restroom. It was Tang Suan, the sports captain, and her friends. They beat him up mercilessly. Suan demanded that Haoyi explain the news that had gone viral online. Haoyi insisted that he didn't know anything. Furious, Suan accused him of being heartless and not understanding her pain. Instead of responding, Haoyi's eyes drifted towards Suan's chest, and she punched him immediately. Annoyed, Suan reminded him that he used to call her by name when they were together, yet now he acted like he didn't know her. Her friends questioned why Suan never told them about Haoyi before. They were angry at Haoyi for making Suan cry and prepared to beat him up again. However, Suan stopped them, saying it was between her and Haoyi and they shouldn't interfere. Suan leaned down close to Haoyi, her voice suddenly soft and sweet. She told him to come clean about his relationship with Zitao, or she would do something much worse to him. Haoyi sat there, completely overwhelmed, unsure of how to escape the chaos surrounding him. Haoyi couldn't understand why Suan was doing this to him. Still, he insisted that he really wasn't close to Zitao. Hearing that, Suan hit Haoyi again. When the restroom door finally opened, Suan and her group walked out with Haoyi trailing behind them. Outside, the students were still waiting for him. Just as Haoyi stepped out, Lin Yuan, the smartest student in school, suddenly appeared, ran toward him, and hugged him tightly. Haoyi was bewildered, unsure of what was about to happen next. Yuan told Haoyi to come home with her because Xiao Hong and Xiao Ming missed him so much. Haoyi was completely confused. He had no idea who Xiao Hong and Xiao Ming were. Without warning, Yuan hit him with a book, calling him a traitor for cheating on her, even forgetting their 2 children. Just as Yuan was about to hit him even harder, Suan intervened, grabbing Yuan's hand in time. Suan declared that she was the only one allowed to do that to Haoyi. Annoyed, Yuan snapped back, saying that since the earth was formed, Hao Yi was destined to be hers. Students around them started snapping pictures of the argument between Yuan and Suan. While they were busy fighting, Hao Yi saw an opportunity and bolted. One of the students quickly noticed him escaping and alerted the others that Hao Yi was running away. Hao Yi ran for his life, but no matter where he went, people were chasing after him. With no choice, he dashed up the emergency stairs and headed to the rooftop. Zitao was already waiting for him there. Meanwhile, the students continued to chase him up to the roof, followed closely by Yuan and Suan. Yuan stopped abruptly when she saw Zitao standing there. Suan, on the other hand, demanded that Hao Yi explain everything immediately. Feeling overwhelmed, Hao Yi was cornered by everyone, especially those three girls. He didn't even understand what was happening anymore. Desperate, Hao Yi shouted that he didn't know any of the three girls. He walked all the way to the edge of the rooftop and threatened to jump off to prove his innocence. However, the crowd, already furious with him, charged forward to grab him. Left with no other choice, Hao Yi let himself off the building. As he fell through the air, Hao Yi thought the nightmare would finally end and it would all be over. But to his shock, something strange happened. A mysterious force emerged from the sky. Everything around him froze, and Hao Yi realized that time itself had stopped. Suddenly, he saw a beautiful girl appear in front of him. She looked at him and said he seemed way too calm while falling. She had actually hoped he would wet his pants. The girl introduced herself as the goddess of love and immediately asked Hao Yi if he had ever eaten a love chocolate. Confused, Hao Yi was thrown off by her words. He wondered if she was referring to a cake he had eaten before. He remembered seeing a piece of cake on the rooftop, possibly left there by someone. Since it would have been a waste to leave it, he decided to eat it. The goddess of love explained that the chocolate cake he ate had the power to make anyone fall in love. If Hao Yi ate it with a girl, then that girl would fall in love with him. Hao Yi was horrified as he realized he had shared the cake with the girls, and now they were all after him. He couldn't believe something so ridiculous was happening to him. Still in disbelief, Hao Yi asked himself if the goddess of love really existed in this world. But there she was, right in front of him as he fell from the rooftop. The goddess of love introduced herself as Mai Tata, explaining that she was still in training. Tata told Hao Yi he didn't need to thank her, and cheekily added that he should enjoy the happiness of being surrounded by women. Frustrated, Hao Yi snapped at Tata, yelling that his peaceful life had been completely ruined because of her. He told her that if he hadn't run away, he might have been killed, or worse, expelled and forced to become homeless. Hao Yi felt like his life was over. Tata, unimpressed, called him dramatic and insisted that his problems weren't impossible to fix. As long as Hao Yi could fulfill their wishes, the magic would disappear and Hao Yi would finally be free from them. According to Tata, it was really simple. Suddenly, Tata caught a whiff of food and was distracted. Hao Yi, irritated, said that if it was so easy, she should do it herself. Time, which had been stopped, resumed once again. The students chasing Hao Yi were in disbelief that he had actually jumped off the building. They rushed to check below, but he was nowhere to be found. They kept searching. Suan was baffled about where Hao Yi could have gone. She looked around but still didn't find him, and in the process, she bumped into Yuan. The tension between Suan and Yuan flared again as their rivalry over Hao Yi grew. Meanwhile, Hao Yi was hiding behind a tree, catching his breath as he scanned for Zitao. He was worried something terrible might happen to her. He imagined Zitao crying over him, heartbroken that he had so many other women in his life, and wondering what would happen to the baby she claimed to be carrying. Zitao, still on the rooftop, was indeed crying. When Hao Yi finally reached her, panting, Zitao was shocked but relieved to see he was okay. Hao Yi told her to meet him somewhere tomorrow. Zitao smiled and teasingly asked if this meant he was asking her out on a date. The next day, Hao Yi took Zitao to a hospital for a checkup. As they sat in the waiting room, people gave them judgmental looks. Some whispered about how kids these days had no self-control and caused all sorts of problems. Zitao leaned on Hao Yi's shoulder, and Hao Yi, staring at her, realized how cute she looked up close. Zitao asked him to take her to get the test results. Before Hao Yi could respond, Zitao commented on how kind he was and said she was sure he would make a great dad someday. The doctor suddenly appeared with the results, confirming there was no baby in Zitao's stomach. Hao Yi was ecstatic to hear this. Zitao, however, was puzzled, insisting she had felt a baby inside her. She quickly concluded it was her fault and vowed to try harder next time to get pregnant. She even suggested they buy something to speed up the process, claiming she knew all about it. Hao Yi quickly changed the subject, suggesting they visit her family to clear things up. When they arrived at Zitao's house, Hao Yi was stunned. The place was a grand mansion, practically a castle. Servants greeted Zitao, addressing her as princess. That was when Hao Yi realized Zitao came from an incredibly wealthy family. Hao Yi couldn't wrap his head around why someone as perfect as Zitao wanted him to fulfill her wishes. Zitao told Hao Yi she would always remember this day as the day he came to propose to her. Hao Yi couldn't even fathom it. Even in his wildest imagination, he was still a loser. He silently acknowledged that his life was nothing but a mess. Zitao, on the other hand, said that even if her father rejected him, she'd still be happy because Hao Yi at least tried. A maid arrived to greet Zitao and asked who Hao Yi was. Zitao was about to call in her boyfriend, but Hao Yi quickly covered her mouth. He introduced himself as a close friend of Zitao's father instead. The maid greeted Hao Yi warmly. Hao Yi was taken aback to learn that Zitao lived alone. The maid explained that Zitao's father worked abroad and never returned home, and she pitied Zitao for it. Hao Yi then decided it would be better to leave since Zitao's father wasn't around. However, the maid insisted that Hao Yi stay, saying Zitao specifically asked him not to leave. Just then, one of Zitao's guards arrived with news from the school. The school had called and reported that a student named Hao Yi had kidnapped Zitao. Hearing this, Hao Yi began sneaking out of the house, trying to make his escape. The maid said that Hao Yi's name sounded familiar to her. Zitao's guards, however, were furious at Hao Yi and prepared to beat him up. Hao Yi pleaded with them, insisting that they had misunderstood the situation, but the maid urged them to attack him anyway. Hao Yi ended up getting severely beaten. Zitao arrived just in time and ordered her guards to release Hao Yi, declaring that she and Hao Yi were in love. The guards hesitated momentarily, but one of them scoffed and said that if Zitao truly loved someone like Hao Yi, the world might as well be ending. He instructed the others to finish Hao Yi off. Once again, Hao Yi was brutally attacked. Zitao shouted that she didn't care if Hao Yi was poor or unemployed. Even if the best he could do was support her as a scavenger, she would still marry him. Despite her words, the guards showed no mercy and continued to pummel Hao Yi. Through her tears, Zitao vowed to try harder next time, even though she wasn't pregnant anymore. She encouraged Hao Yi to give it his best tomorrow as well. Hearing this, the guards became even more enraged and intensified their assault on Hao Yi. Zitao finally pleaded with them to stop torturing Hao Yi. By now, Hao Yi had been thrown against a wall and gasping for air, begged Zitao to stop talking. Zitao quickly pulled Hao Yi to his feet and dragged him into a room, slamming the door shut behind them. The guards pounded relentlessly on Zitao's door, demanding to know what Hao Yi was doing inside. Zitao refused to open it and declared that her love for Hao Yi was pure and true. Hao Yi panicked, clamped his hand over Zitao's mouth, begging her to stop shouting. The guards outside kept banging on the door, warning Zitao not to fall for Hao Yi's tricks. Meanwhile, Hao Yi let out a frustrated sigh and accidentally noticed an old calendar sitting on Zitao's desk. On the calendar was a note marking the best day ever, the day she had lunch with her father. The guards continued to hammer on the door, while the maid called Zitao's father to report the incident. However, her father brushed it off, saying it didn't matter as long as Zitao was safe. He even told the maid to stop bothering him with such trivial issues. In a sudden burst of determination, Hao Yi flung the door open and snatched the maid's phone. He yelled into it, declaring that he was the one who had kidnapped Zitao and daring her father to come meet him. The guards, surprisingly impressed by Hao Yi's courage, decided to prepare a meal for him so he wouldn't be hungry when meeting Zitao's father. Not long after, 2 helicopters landed in the yard and several cars arrived to secure the property's entrance. Hao Yi braced himself, convinced that wealth could only be achieved through hard work. He knew he had come too far to back down now. Zitao's father finally arrived at the house, greeted with reverence by the guards as they lined up to welcome him. Zitao's father arrived in front of his house with his subordinates, and all the bodyguards respectfully greeted him. Hao Yi could feel the intimidating aura emanating from Zitao's father. Zitao's father remarked that Hao Yi was quite bold for summoning him. He then ordered his subordinates to keep an eye on Hao Yi. Hao Yi, feeling relieved that perhaps nothing would happen, quickly had his hopes dashed when Zitao's father commanded his men to teach Hao Yi a lesson. Once again, Hao Yi was surrounded and beaten up. Zitao tried to intervene, telling her father that Hao Yi was innocent. She showed him the results of her checkup, proving that she wasn't pregnant. This made Zitao's father stop his men, and he turned to Hao Yi, asking about his true intentions. Hao Yi then asked if he hadn't claimed to have kidnapped Zitao, would Zitao's father have come home to see her at all, or would he have just continued forgetting about her? Zitao's father was shocked by Hao Yi's words, and Zitao herself was deeply moved. Hao Yi continued, explaining that Zitao still needed her father, but her father couldn't see that. While Zitao's father had given her a luxurious house, personal bodyguards, and servants, and ensured she never went hungry, was that really what Zitao wanted? Hao Yi passionately argued that what Zitao truly desired was her father's love. Did you ever give her that love? Hao Yi shouted. Zitao was overwhelmed with emotion at Hao Yi's words. Zitao's father, furious, grabbed Hao Yi by the collar and yelled, "What do you know about love? Do you think money grows on trees?" Hao Yi pleaded with him to stop hurting his own family. He then showed Zitao's father a calendar from the previous year, marked as Zitao's best day. It made her father remember a joyful moment they'd shared together during a simple lunch. It dawned on him that what Zitao wanted most was to be with him. To others, that moment might not have seemed like much, but to Zitao, it was her biggest dream. Hao Yi asked Zitao's father to think it over. Even the maids and bodyguards were moved to tears by Hao Yi's sincerity. They praised him, saying he was a truly good person. Hao Yi then said his goodbyes, running off quickly in an attempt to escape. However, it turned out he was just running in circles and ended up right back where he started. Zitao caught up to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. Confused, Hao Yi asked how she caught up so fast. Zitao replied that she had simply taken the back door. Zitao thanked Hao Yi and kissed him, but suddenly, she disappeared. Hao Yi was stunned and wondered what had just happened. Had Zitao vanished? Out of nowhere, Tata appeared, explaining that Zitao hadn't disappeared. Instead, her magic had worn off. Tata congratulated Hao Yi for fulfilling Zitao's wish. Meanwhile, Zitao lay asleep in her bedroom. Her father approached her and asked if she'd like to have lunch with him. Tata admitted she was surprised Hao Yi resolved everything so quickly. Hao Yi grumbled that he simply hated overly complicated problems. He left in a hurry, muttering that his life had nearly ended because of Zitao, but was thankfully resolved in just 2 days. At least he didn't have to see Zitao sad anymore. Tata smiled at Hao Yi's seriousness. The next day, on his way to school, Hao Yi tripped and found a flyer that featured him being sought after as Yuan's husband. Flyers were scattered everywhere around the school. Hao Yi was dumbfounded and wondered what on earth was happening now. He didn't know when all this trouble would finally end, and even compared himself to the legendary king of a harem who achieved eternal happiness, if only that were true for him. Trying to avoid attention, Hao Yi covered his face and crept toward his classroom. He even resorted to crawling to his seat. Meanwhile, a girl was seen searching for Hao Yi, eventually discovering which class he was in. Hao Yi finally made it to his desk, but suddenly caught a familiar fragrance. He looked up to see Zitao standing in front of him, asking if he wanted to go out with her. Hao Yi was shocked and asked how Zitao could remember him. She smiled and replied, "How could I ever forget you?" She then thanked Hao Yi for everything he had done for her. Panicking, Hao Yi called out for Tata, who immediately appeared, freezing time. Hao Yi demanded to know what was going on, pointing out that Tata herself had said Zitao's magic had disappeared once her wish was fulfilled. Tata sheepishly admitted that she had forgotten to tell him something because he had left too quickly the day before. When the love magic ended, the enchanted memories also disappeared, but normal memories remained intact. Everything that happened during those 2 days would not be forgotten by Zitao, which meant that whatever feelings Zitao had for Hao Yi came from her heart alone. Before Hao Yi could complain to Tata about all the trouble, Tata suddenly disappeared and time resumed as normal. Just as Zitao was about to ask why Hao Yi had mentioned Tata, Hao Yi quickly brushed it off, saying it was nothing important. Zitao concluded that Hao Yi had agreed to go out with her. Out of nowhere, someone appeared and threw a knife that narrowly missed Hao Yi. The girl's name was Aoying Shili. She called Hao Yi honey and asked why he hadn't invited her on his date. Shili then interrogated Hao Yi about his relationship with Zitao. Terrified, Hao Yi stammered that it was all a misunderstanding. Shili, however, declared that she would clear up the misunderstanding herself. Without warning, she kissed Hao Yi fiercely on the lips, shocking their classmates, who shouted about how daring the two of them were. Shili then smugly asked Zitao if she understood now that Hao Yi belonged to her. Hao Yi, rendered helpless by Shili, desperately asked for help. Just then, Shili's mother appeared and smacked a bag into Shili's face, telling her to stop what she was doing. Shili, still recovering, asked what her mother was doing there. Her mother was stunned that Shili had traveled all the way from America just to see Hao Yi. Hao Yi nervously greeted Shili's mother, but both Shili and her mother immediately told him to be quiet. Shili's mother demanded that Shili return home, but Shili refused, boldly claiming that no one could stop her from being with Hao Yi. Shili's mother, clearly disapproving of her daughter's relationship with Hao Yi, insisted that Shili give up on him. The two began to fight right in front of everyone. Shili's mother easily won, leaving Shili lying on the ground completely defeated. The students wasted no time snapping photos of the spectacle. Shili's mother ordered her subordinates to take Shili away immediately. As she was about to leave, Hao Yi nervously asked if she was really going to take Shili back to America. Shili's mother simply replied, inviting someone and asking them to leave are two very different things. She then ominously advised Hao Yi to consider buying insurance. Terrified, Hao Yi muttered that his life might soon come to an end. As he turned around, Tata suddenly appeared in front of him, startling him. Frustrated, Hao Yi scolded Tata for sneaking up on him and told her not to pop out of nowhere like a ghost. Despite calling her sweet-looking like a goddess, he grumbled that her behavior was as scary as a ghost. From a distance, Zitao noticed Hao Yi seemingly talking to himself and wondered what he was doing. Curious, she approached him. Meanwhile, Tata asked Hao Yi if Shili had also eaten the magic chocolate. Hao Yi sighed, saying that Shili had always been like that, his scariest childhood friend. According to Hao Yi's parents, Shili and he had played together since they were babies, and they even went to the same grade school and middle school. Just thinking about it made Hao Yi's head hurt. Suddenly, Hao Yi felt someone behind him. Zitao, in a panic, tried to hide behind 3 leaves, which was of course useless because Hao Yi could still see her clearly. Embarrassed, Zitao said she didn't want to interfere with Hao Yi and Shili's relationship since they were childhood friends. Gathering her courage, Zitao told Hao Yi to forget about their plans for tomorrow, but Hao Yi, confused, said he had forgotten to discuss the time and place for their meeting. Apologizing, he admitted he wasn't good at choosing locations and asked Zitao to let him know if she had a place in mind. Hearing that, Zitao smiled and walked away. Tata, watching everything unfold, commented that Hao Yi seemed to be starting to like Zitao after everything they had been through. Annoyed, Hao Yi shot back that it was all Tata's fault for setting this up in the first place. He warned Tata to stop following him and stormed off. Hao Yi made his way toward the school rooftop, trying to clear his head. But on the stairs, he bumped into Suan. Without a word, Suan slapped him and ordered him to follow her immediately. Hao Yi ran into Suan on the stairs and Suan immediately slapped him. She coldly declared that their relationship was over. Hao Yi, unfazed, responded that he didn't care if they'd broke up and added that with such a harsh attitude, no one would ever like Suan. Furious, Suan stormed off, leaving Hao Yi stressed and frustrated. Tata appeared moments later, asking what had happened to Hao Yi in the short time she'd been gone. Hao Yi explained that he had just been slapped and dumped by Suan. Even though Suan's feelings were fake, suddenly being dumped like that still made him upset. Hao Yi then asked Tata why Suan had decided to break up. Was it because the problem wasn't resolved? Tata smirked and said that Hao Yi clearly didn't understand women. She explained that when most women ask for a breakup, it's usually a warning sign. Tata then disappeared before Hao Yi could respond, leaving him worried that something terrible might happen to Suan. He even wondered if she might be planning to hurt herself. Later that afternoon, Hao Yi saw Suan punishing a group of boys by making them do push-ups. They looked utterly exhausted, struggling to complete the hundreds of push-ups Suan demanded. She scolded them, saying they deserved this punishment for losing a bet to the girls. One of the boys begged for forgiveness, promising they wouldn't underestimate her again. Instead of forgiving him, Suan sprayed him with water. Tata and Hao Yi watched the whole thing from a distance. Tata remarked that Suan was truly oppressive, managing to stay completely unfazed despite just having broken up. Seeing how bad the situation was, Hao Yi decided he had to step in and save the poor boys. Tata teased him, pointing out that he could barely save himself. Hao Yi approached Suan, trying to reason with her. He told her that it was just a bet and there was no need to push them so hard. Suan scoffed, mocking Hao Yi for daring to confront her after what had happened between them. The boys cheered Hao Yi on, calling him their savior, but Suan quickly silenced them by spraying them with water again. In a panic, Hao Yi grabbed the water sprayer from Suan, but in the struggle, he accidentally sprayed her instead, soaking her completely. Frozen in fear, Hao Yi braced himself, convinced that Suan would kill him. But instead, Suan looked at him and said that he was far too kind and loved everyone too much. She finally realized why Hao Yi couldn't stay loyal. With that, Suan turned and walked away. The boys, now free from Suan's punishment, celebrated Hao Yi's arrival. They couldn't believe he had the courage to stand up to her, considering how terrifying she was. Suan, meanwhile, headed to the bathroom to clean up. As she washed, she couldn't stop thinking about Hao-yi, muttering to herself that he was trash who didn't deserve her love. Determined to move on, she told herself that everything was over and tomorrow would be a fresh start. The next day, Hao-yi overslept and woke up to find Shili lying on his bed. Shocked, he asked what she was doing in his room. Shili, unfazed, called him honey and told him to get up already. She asked why he was in such a hurry since it was Sunday. Then she playfully asked if Hao-yi had a date to go on. Hao-yi replied that he planned to buy some books and finish his school assignments. Hearing that, Shili left the room and locked the door behind her. Panicking, Hao-yi shouted that he didn't want to be trapped in his room on the day of his first date, but Shili calmly told him to relax and stay at home. In the living room, Shili ran into Hao-yi's parents. They asked where Hao-yi was, and Shili told them that he wanted to stay home and study. She also claimed that Hao-yi had asked her to buy some books for him. To ensure her plan worked, she asked them not to unlock Hao-yi's door. Hao-yi's mother, clearly suspicious, turned to her husband and said that their son was being seduced and asked why he wasn't advising him. Hao-yi's father shrugged it off, saying it wasn't such a bad thing to have a girl taking care of him. Annoyed, Hao-yi's mother compared him to Yun and scolded him for being so careless. Trying to change the subject, Hao-yi's father commented on how good the tea tasted. Meanwhile, Hao-yi pounded on his bedroom door, shouting for someone to let him out, but no one responded. Desperate, he climbed out the window and tried to sneak along the building's ledge. As he passed by the neighbor's window, the young child inside started crying and accused Hao-yi of being a pervert sneaking around. Hao-yi, exasperated, yelled back that he wasn't a pervert. He just needed to borrow their door to escape. Meanwhile, Zitao was still waiting for Hao-yi at the place they had agreed to meet. She had been waiting for quite a while and suddenly began to feel worried, especially since she couldn't stop thinking about the time Shili kissed Hao-yi in class the day before. She remembered how Shili had declared that Hao-yi belonged to her, and the fact that Hao-yi and Shili were childhood friends only made things worse. Zitao started to believe their meeting was no longer happening. Out of nowhere, Hao-yi came running toward her, apologizing for being late because of everything that had happened at home. Zitao smiled and said it was okay, adding that she had just arrived as well. She then invited Hao-yi to have some tea with her. Hao-yi didn't expect Zitao to invite him for something as simple as tea. He had secretly hoped that she called him out to confess her feelings. Zitao, on the other hand, felt nervous and unsure whether she should say something. She was completely flustered, not knowing what to say because it was her first time going on a date with a guy. Her heart was pounding so hard that she worried Hao-yi might notice. Suddenly, Hao-yi placed his hand on Zitao's forehead to check if she was sick because her face had turned red. Without realizing it, their faces were so close that they found themselves staring straight into each other's eyes. Surprised, they quickly pulled back. Hao-yi apologized and Zitao, blushing even more, said that she was fine. Both of them looked away awkwardly, trying to hide how embarrassed they were. Out of the blue, Hao-yi remembered that there was an anime and manga festival happening that day. He excitedly asked Zitao if she wanted to check it out with him. Hearing that, Zitao smiled brightly and agreed. Meanwhile, Shili returned to Hao-yi's room, bringing him the books she had promised. But when she got there, she found the room empty. Thinking that Hao-yi was playing hide and seek with her, Shili muttered that she wouldn't let him win. At the festival, there were tons of visitors gathered around taking pictures of 3 cosplayers. They were chatting in a way that sounded like they were mocking Suan. It seemed like they didn't like her very much. As Zitao and Hao-yi walked past, many visitors turned to stare at Zitao, captivated by her beauty. Zitao really wanted to hold Hao-yi's hand, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Hao-yi also wished Zitao would hold his hand, and for a moment, he thought about taking the initiative himself. But the crowd was too overwhelming, and the moment never felt quite right. Suddenly, a group of people came rushing through, shouting Suan's name. The crowd was so frantic that they bumped into Zitao, who nearly fell. Thankfully, Hao-yi quickly caught her before she hit the ground. Hao-yi was shocked to see that all these people were flocking to take pictures of Suan, the same Suan who had dumped him just the day before. At the festival, Suan looked incredibly sweet and charming, completely different from the strong and brash version of her at school. When Suan turned around and noticed Hao-yi standing there, she froze in shock. She hadn't expected to see him at the festival. At the anime and manga festival, Suan was cosplaying when she suddenly spotted Hao-yi arriving at the event. She wanted to chase after him, but the large crowd of visitors taking pictures of her made it hard to get away. Eventually, Suan managed to approach Hao Yi and immediately asked why he came to the festival. Was it just to make fun of her? Out of nowhere, Zitao called out to Hao Yi, saying that the visitors at the festival were really scary. They kept taking photos, which made Zitao anxious. Suddenly, Suan noticed some of her sports club members at the festival, so she quickly grabbed Hao Yi and Zitao to move them somewhere else. In the middle of the situation, Suan had no choice but to flash a sweet smile at the visitors, calling out her name. The crowd nearly fainted from how adorable she looked. Meanwhile, Shili had just arrived at the festival entrance. She was carrying a sword, and the visitors were in awe, thinking she was a cosplayer because she looked so cool. However, Shili wasn't there for fun. She came looking for Hao Yi, knowing he couldn't escape her. Suan pulled Hao Yi and Zitao into a room to avoid being seen by her sports club members. Hao Yi teased Suan, saying he didn't expect her to enjoy cosplay and that it actually suited her. Suan got annoyed, snapping back that Hao Yi was still making fun of her. Hao Yi denied it, saying he wasn't mocking her, he was complimenting her. Suan then covered Hao Yi's mouth and grumbled that she wouldn't be hiding like this if it weren't for him. Hao Yi asked why she needed to hide since she looked cute. Hearing this, Zitao began to think that maybe Hao Yi had a thing for cat costumes. Suan then admitted that she didn't actually like doing this. Ever since she started school, the girls in their class were constantly harassed by the boys. At first, the boys were just staring at the pretty girls. But then two girls who weren't particularly attractive and were more muscular showed up. The boys immediately chased those two girls away. They didn't stop there. The boys continued to bully them, calling them ugly and claiming they were full of viruses. The two girls were insulted, splashed with water, and treated like trash. They ended up crying because they couldn't stand the bullying anymore. Seeing this, Suan was furious and immediately stepped in to teach the boys a lesson. She fought off the boys, which left the two bullied girls amazed. Suan then asked them if they didn't want to fight back. The two girls said Suan was incredible and that they wanted to follow her. From that day on, Suan protected the girls at school. Everyone started to see her as a role model, so she couldn't let them see her in cute outfits like this. If they ever did, they'd feel disappointed, thinking she was just messing with them. They would probably abandon her, leaving her completely alone. Hao Yi pointed out that even though Suan's intentions were good, she was still hiding her true self from others. He told her that she should show people who she really was instead of living in hiding like this. Suan shot back, saying someone like Hao Yi would never understand her feelings. She then called him a Capricorn and added that she absolutely hated him. Confused, Hao Yi asked what being a Capricorn had to do with anything. Suddenly, an announcement came over the loudspeaker saying that the 12th River City Women's Competition was about to start. Zitao quickly reminded them that the cosplay competition seemed like it was starting soon. However, Suan said it was pointless because the competition required 3 participants to enter. If they didn't have 3 people, they couldn't compete, which was why she always came alone to defend her title. But now she no longer had the right to participate. Zitao seemed to understand the situation and then came up with an idea. Since they needed 3 people, she suggested that she and Hao Yi join Suan to compete together. Suan was surprised that such an idea could work. However, Hao Yi thought it was impossible since he was a guy. But Suan didn't care. She immediately dragged Hao Yi to the dressing room to get him ready as a female cosplayer. While they were busy transforming Hao Yi, Shili spotted them. With a bit of persuasion, Hao Yi finally transformed into an incredibly adorable female cosplayer. Suan commented that Hao Yi looked so pretty, even she felt jealous of him. Zitao also agreed, saying Hao Yi looked stunning. When Hao Yi stepped out of the dressing room and saw himself in the mirror, he was completely shocked by his appearance. He practiced greeting the visitors with cute gestures and introduced himself as Gai. However, he couldn't help but feel disgusted with himself for acting that way. Unbeknownst to him, Shili was snapping photos of him from afar. Annoyed at Hao Yi for lying to her, she still couldn't help but admire his cross-dressing. She thought it was so cute that she could just eat him up in one bite. Shili decided she had a new plan to have some fun with Hao Yi. Suddenly, Suan burst into tears after discovering that the outfit she planned to wear for the competition had been torn. Zitao wondered who could have done something so cruel to Suan. Hao Yi recalled that there were people who didn't want Suan to win, so they resorted to dirty tricks like this. Hao Yi asked Suan why she didn't just wear another outfit since this one was ruined. However, Suan misunderstood him, thinking he was implying that someone like her wasn't suited to wear something like that. Hao Yi immediately clarified that he didn't mean it that way, but Suan, now upset, snapped that she didn't need his pity. She cried and ran off, leaving Hao Yi calling after her, but he couldn't stop her. The ones who ruined Suwon's outfit were the same girls who had been gossiping about her in the lobby earlier. They had planned this sabotage so they could win the competition themselves. Haoyi asked Zitao if Suwon's outfit was expensive. Zitao explained that the first time Suwon won, it was because she wore a costume she had made herself, which was irreplaceable to her. Suwon dropped the torn outfit and ran outside. Haoyi finally understood why Suwon was so determined to protect her secret. She was very careful about how others saw her. At that moment, Suwon seemed to have lost the will to fight back, but what mattered most was that they still needed to participate in the competition and win it. While in the bathroom, Haoyi tried to recall what a cosplayer needed to do. First, introduce themselves, then showcase their unique appeal as the main attraction. He still hadn't found Suwon, and Zitao hadn't managed to find a suitable outfit yet. It seemed like Haoyi would have to go on stage first. Suddenly, Tata appeared, startling him. Haoyi reminded her that she was in the men's bathroom. Tata nonchalantly asked if Haoyi was having trouble. Haoyi asked her how he could win the cosplay competition and surprise everyone. An idea popped into his head as he thought about the concept of surprises, and he stared at Tata. Feeling awkward under Haoyi's gaze, Tata squirmed uncomfortably. The Anan cosplay competition for women finally began, and Haoyi, now introducing himself as Yai, had to go first. He felt a little nervous because the crowd was huge. Some girls mocked the silly name he used, asking if his stupid disguise was aiming for first place. They jeered at him, making fun of his efforts. Determined, Haoyi reassured himself that he could do this. As he stepped onto the stage, he felt incredibly nervous under the stares of the audience and the constant flash of cameras. He tried to greet them, but in his nervousness, he tripped and fell. The crowd erupted into laughter, calling him useless and pathetic. Haoyi froze for a moment, but then suddenly put on the cutest face he could muster, smiled sweetly, and told them to stop yelling at him. The entire crowd was stunned. They immediately started praising him, exclaiming how adorable he was. In an instant, they all fell for Haoyi's charm. The girls who had mocked him earlier realized that the competition wasn't just about scoring points. Popularity was what truly mattered. Haoyi had managed to win the crowd over. He promised himself that next time he'd do even better and left the rest to Suwon and Zitao. He wasn't going to give up. Meanwhile, Tata was searching for Suwon, but she was having a hard time because everyone at the event looked so similar. Zitao was still running around frantically, trying to find where Suwon had gone. Haoyi begged the host to give him more time to wait for his two friends. He kept pleading for just a little more time, but the host refused, saying that 3 groups had already performed and they couldn't keep delaying Haoyi's group. If this continued, Haoyi's group would be disqualified from the competition. The host urged Haoyi to resolve his group's issues quickly. He then announced that the next group to perform was Haoyi's. Haoyi stepped onto the stage and stood frozen for a moment, prompting the host to ask why he was just standing there. The crowd started chanting Suwon's name over and over. From above, Suwon could see Haoyi. Gathering his courage, Haoyi finally spoke up to calm everyone down. Then he began to sing in his cutest style. The audience loved it, but they continued shouting for Suwon, demanding that she appear on stage. Hearing the crowd scream for Suwon made Haoyi stop singing. Backstage, the 3 cosplayers who had sabotaged Suwon's costume were watching Haoyi perform. They were confident the audience would quickly grow bored of Haoyi's performance, even calling it a clown act. The audience kept shouting for Suwon to appear, and Haoyi pleaded with them to listen. He explained that he had come to the festival with a friend and said he thought Suwon was the one suffering the most. To avoid hurting anyone's feelings, Suwon always tried to hide her true self, but no one realized just how much she hid the things she loved. Haoyi went on, saying that he had seen how much Suwon truly enjoyed cosplaying. Though it shocked him at first, he wanted to tell Suwon that when she was in cosplay, she was the most confident and natural version of herself that he had ever seen. Haoyi then shouted, asking where Suwon was and if she could hear him. He begged her to come out. Suddenly, the railing above the stage broke and Suwon fell. The crowd gasped in fear, worried something terrible would happen to her. At that moment, time seemed to stop. Haoyi moved effortlessly, catching Suwon and pulling her into a hug. Miraculously, they both transformed into new costumes. The crowd erupted into cheers, amazed at Haoyi and Suwon's incredible appearance. People in the audience speculated that they must have had tons of sponsors and spent a fortune on their costumes. Cameras flashed non-stop as everyone took pictures of them. Haoyi turned to Suwon, asking if she was okay. The host announced that it looked like they already had their winner since the crowd's reaction was so enthusiastic. In the middle of the audience, Zitao watched Hao Yi and Suan's performance and admitted that it was truly amazing, though she couldn't help but feel a little sad that she wasn't the one up there. The host even joked that he never expected Hao Yi to know magic tricks. Suan looked at Hao Yi and said it didn't seem like magic at all, demanding that he explain what had really happened. Hao Yi, however, couldn't bring himself to tell her. Tata, watching from backstage, sighed in relief, grateful that everything had been done just in time. Meanwhile, Shili was watching Hao Yi and Suan from behind the stage, annoyed that Suan had suddenly gained so much confidence after Hao Yi changed her look. Calling Suan slag, Shili muttered that she wanted to cut Suan in half. Suddenly, Shili overheard some girls talking about Suan. They were surprised Suan had still performed even after they had torn her costume. They admitted that Hao Yi looked really cute and even discussed inviting Hao Yi to join their group next time. They couldn't stop gushing about how sweet Hao Yi was. Hearing this, Shili grew furious. Realizing that these girls were planning to steal Hao Yi, she decided to teach them a lesson. In the dressing room, Suan was visibly exhausted after the competition. Hao Yi asked her if she was okay, reminding her that they had won. Suan scolded Hao Yi for being in the women's dressing room and told him to leave. Hao Yi explained that his clothes were inside the room. Suan told him to wait outside and said she would change first. Hao Yi insisted that he should go first since he could change quickly, but Suan refused. They began bickering over who should change first. In the middle of their squabble, Suan shoved Hao Yi. Suddenly, they found themselves undressed and face to face. Suan froze for a moment before slapping Hao Yi across the face. Suan quickly shut the door, but Hao Yi shouted that his clothes were still inside. Without hesitation, Suan threw his clothes and shoes out at him, slammed the door shut again, and called him a pervert. Just then, Tata approached Hao Yi and asked if he was in trouble. Frustrated, Hao Yi snapped at her, asking how she could even ask such a question. After all, wasn't she the one who had caused all this mess? Tata froze in shock, only to realize Hao Yi was undressed. Embarrassed, she covered her eyes and told him to get dressed quickly out of respect for the goddess who had helped him. Hao Yi, still annoyed, blamed Tata for not warning him that the outfit would disappear after some time. Apologetic, Tata admitted she wasn't very skilled with magic and often made mistakes when nervous. She confessed she had the lowest rank among all her peers. Hao Yi softened and reassured Tata that it wasn't her fault. He admitted that if she hadn't shown up at the right moment, he wouldn't have been able to save Suan. Hao Yi then thanked Tata, acknowledging that it was thanks to her always watching over him. Tata found herself marveling at how strange humans could be. Zitao then approached Hao Yi, inviting him to head home. Hao Yi suddenly realized he had forgotten about her entirely. He asked if Suan would be joining them on the way back, but Suan told him to go ahead without her. Curious, Suan asked why Hao Yi would even consider inviting her to walk home with him. Little did she know 3 girls who had earlier sabotaged her outfit were trapped inside the wardrobe where she had changed. Apparently, Shili had locked them in there. Meanwhile, Hao Yi only escorted Zitao as far as the station because he had something else to do. Zitao assumed it must be related to Suan. Before parting ways, Zitao thanked Hao Yi for walking her to the station, saying she had a wonderful day. As she left, Hao Yi found himself thinking about how considerate Zitao was. Still, his mind wandered back to Suan. How was she doing? As Suan walked out of the building alone, Hao Yi suddenly called out to her. She turned around, scanning for the source of the voice. Spotting Hao Yi by himself, Suan asked where Zitao was. Hao Yi explained that he had sent Zitao home without him because there was something he wanted to talk about with Suan. Surprised, Suan asked if Hao Yi felt sorry for her. Without missing a beat, Hao Yi invited Suan to come over to his place and stay the night. Furious, Suan slapped Hao Yi across the face and called him a pervert. She ran off, shouting that she didn't want to talk to him ever again. As he rubbed his cheek, Hao Yi realized that the love spell on Suan must have worn off now that his wish had been fulfilled. Still, he wondered when Suan would ever show her true self. That night, Hao Yi arrived at a woman's house. When she opened the door, she immediately commented on how long it had been since Hao Yi had visited, especially at such a late hour. Smiling, she invited him inside. That night, Hao Yi went to the home of his teacher, Jiran. Ran opened the door and commented on how long it had been since Hao Yi last visited her, especially considering it was already late at night. She invited Hao Yi in and he asked if she was also staying up late. Hao-yi was startled when he saw Ron's revealing outfit and asked if she could wear something a bit more modest. Rain responded by asking what exactly Hao-yi was worried about, especially since it was just the two of them in the house. It became clear to Hao-yi that Rain hadn't changed at all. Rain's house was a complete mess, filled with trash from food and drinks. Hao-yi couldn't believe how long it had been since Ron last cleaned. He was suddenly shocked to see a bride lying on a chair. He thought to himself that it was no wonder Ron was still single. Her life was so chaotic. The sink was overflowing with dirty dishes and her fridge was empty. Hao-yi remarked that even a mouse would starve if it lived in her house. Ray then asked why Hao-yi had come to see her. Was it because his new girlfriend, Shili, was bothering him again? Hao-yi quickly clarified that Shili wasn't his girlfriend. She was just a childhood friend. When they were kids, Shili used to cry because Hao-yi was always better at everything, even though she tried her best, but still couldn't surpass him. To comfort her, Hao-yi told Shili she would definitely do better one day. A few days later, Hao-yi noticed something strange about Shili. He was puzzled as to why she kept chasing him and hitting him. Shili yelled at him, accusing him of lying to her. Hao-yi had told her that her grades would surpass his, but reality didn't match his words. Frustrated, Shili demanded Hao-yi tear up his exam papers so they could compete on a level playing field again. Of course, Hao-yi refused and chose to run away instead. This made Shili even angrier with him. In middle school, Hao-yi's grades remained higher than Shili's, which annoyed her to no end. She started hitting him again and even threatened him not to upset her further. Since then, Hao-yi decided to intentionally let Shili win. Shili was delighted by her victories, and the two of them managed to get through middle school without further problems. However, during summer classes, Shili shouted from outside the classroom, saying she didn't care if Hao-yi's grades weren't as good as hers. She wanted him to go to America with her, and she would cover all the expenses. Hao-yi opened the classroom window and told Shili to stop as he had no intention of going with her. The other students gathered around, curious about the commotion. Shili suddenly proposed a bet. If her grades were better than Hao-yi's in the next exam, he would have to go to America with her and attend school there. In the following exam, Hao-yi achieved the highest score. His classmates were surprised by his sudden improvement. Shili confronted him and asked if he hated her or if he truly didn't want to go to America with her. Hao-yi assured her it wasn't like that and asked her not to misunderstand. Shili started crying and walked away. Hao-yi couldn't help but wonder if Shili's life was more difficult than he realized. Ray then asked if Hao-yi was tired of always letting Shili win. Hao-yi replied that in the next exam he would try even harder, and if there was anything he didn't understand, he would call Ran for help. Ran was shocked, saying it had been a long time since she'd seen Hao-yi so serious. She offered him a drink, which he accepted. That same night, Zitao wanted to send a message to Hao-yi but couldn't decide what to write. Suddenly, Hao-yi messaged her first. Zitao felt touched by Hao-yi's thoughtfulness. Even though she was happy that Hao-yi had helped Suan, she secretly wished she could have Hao-yi all to herself. Meanwhile, a drunk Ron started getting closer to Hao-yi. He told her to stop acting wild because it wasn't funny at all. He explained that he came over because of a friend. Hearing the word friend, Rain began to wonder if Hao-yi had someone else in mind. She mentioned that Hao-yi was quite attractive, and because he was kind and friendly, it wasn't surprising if he had made girlfriends. Hao-yi asked her to stop saying nonsense, especially since he considered himself a loner. Rain eventually fell asleep from drinking. The next morning, when Hao-yi was about to leave, Rain intentionally called out to him loudly, referring to him as darling. Everyone nearby started gossiping, calling Hao-yi a shameless young man, assuming he was in a relationship with an older woman. Frustrated, Hao-yi ran away to avoid further embarrassment. That day, Suan was leading a training session with her sports club members. Her leadership style had softened a bit compared to before. Two male students noticed the change, commenting on how Suan had looked intimidating and stern during practice just the week before. Suddenly, Suan approached them, noting how energetic they seemed. Without warning, she punished them by assigning them an extremely heavy weight to lift. Everyone cheered for the two male students as Suan encouraged them, saying that since they were training with the girls, they needed to set a good example. The boys muttered that Suan's idea of encouragement was more like torture. Suan overheard them, smirked, and playfully tickled one of them before patting his back and telling them to give it their all. Hao-yi then arrived looking for Suan. Without hesitation, Suan dragged Hao-yi outside. Hao-yi asked why she was pulling him away. Suan replied that they had already broken up and it would be awkward if others saw them together. She suggested they talk elsewhere. Out of the blue, Hao-yi announced that he wanted to challenge the entire club to a bet. He explained that he would compete against anyone in the club, and the loser would have to fulfill the winner's request without question. Hao-yi then laid out the rules. if any of them outperformed him in the upcoming midterm exams, they would win. Suan's friends were confused about why Hao Yi was dragging them into it. Hao Yi continued, adding that if he didn't get the highest score in the school, they would also win. He teased Suan, asking if those rules weren't already in her favor. The male students thought Hao Yi was crazy, calling it academic suicide, especially since Lin Yuan was ranked first in the school. Hao Yi asked who among them would step up to protect Suan. Suan was baffled by Hao Yi's logic. It was clear he would lose, especially since one of her subordinates, Xiao Xu, was in the school's top 10 rankings. Suan's friends urged her to accept the challenge, promising they would back her up. Suan reluctantly agreed. Hao Yi left, saying he would return in a week. From that moment on, Hao Yi focused entirely on studying. Later, Hao Yi was studying in the library and Zitao happened to be there too. She overheard some students talking about Hao Yi, saying he had made a bet with Suan. They mentioned that if Hao Yi didn't get the top score, he might even get expelled, which was why he was so determined to study. Suan observed Hao Yi from behind a bookshelf, still unsure of what was going through his mind. That evening, heavy rain poured down unexpectedly, even though it had been sunny earlier. Hao Yi, still studying, decided to go to bed early to prepare for the exams the next day. As he moved to close his window, he noticed Shili standing outside in the rain. Without hesitation, he grabbed an umbrella and went downstairs to meet her. Seeing Hao Yi, Shili ran toward him and hugged him tightly. She confessed that someone had insulted her again and asked if she was a disappointment despite her efforts to change. Hao Yi understood how Shili felt. He assured her that she wasn't a disappointment and embraced her, telling her to stop dwelling on negative thoughts. That morning, Hao Yi was on the train heading to school. Still groggy from the night before, he recalled how he had escorted Shili home. Shili's mother had thanked him, explaining that Shili had been unwell lately and she couldn't let her go to school alone. Meanwhile, Suan was washing her face, her mind wandering to thoughts of Hao Yi, when suddenly, one of her club members informed her that Hao Yi had just arrived at the school gate. Zitao approached Hao Yi, noting that he looked exhausted. Concerned, she asked if he was sure he could handle the exam in his condition. Hao Yi reassured her that he was prepared. Not long after, Suan and her sports club members intercepted him. Suan told Hao Yi that he still had a chance to change his mind, but one of her clubmates interjected, saying it was already too late. They were eager to see him fail. Hao Yi didn't say a word and simply walked past them, prompting the club members to call him a coward. Suan, however, remained curious about what was going through his mind. The exam began with Ran supervising Hao Yi's class. She suspected that once Hao Yi focused, he might surprise everyone. To Ran, there was something undeniably endearing about Hao Yi. Before long, Hao Yi left the exam room. Suan's friends assumed he had given up. When the exam concluded, relief spread among the students. As everyone felt the weight of the exam lift, Suan noticed Hao Yi and thought about approaching him, but Zitao beat her to it, leading Suan to change her mind. Hao Yi asked Zitao for help picking something out specifically. He wanted her to choose some clothes for him. The next day, Suan and her sports club were practicing as the exam results were set to be announced. The club members were confident that Hao Yi would lose, assuring Suan that she shouldn't worry about their bet because Xiao Xu would undoubtedly come out on top. They believed there was no way Hao Yi could outperform Xiao Xu. To everyone's surprise, Hao Yi arrived holding a cosplay outfit. He declared that Suan had lost the bet, and as her punishment, she would have to wear the outfit for 2 weeks. Shock rippled through the group. They mocked Hao Yi for having such a disgusting hobby and couldn't believe he had actually won the bet. Xiao Xu immediately checked the exam results and proudly announced she had ranked 5th. Hao Yi smirked and casually told them to check the top spot. Everyone was stunned when they saw that Hao Yi had achieved first place with a perfect score. Hao Yi confidently told them they already knew the outcome and left it up to Suan, as their leader, to handle the rest. Some members accused Hao Yi of being a pervert, questioning the legitimacy of his results. Suan, however, agreed to fulfill her punishment without hesitation. As Hao Yi walked away, he suddenly remarked that someone once told him there's nothing wrong with a man being a little perverted. He added that he didn't think there was anything strange about wearing the outfit. Suan's friends later approached the school administration to challenge Hao Yi's results, but the school confirmed there was no issue with his scores. They had verified his results with all the teachers, and there was even his signed acknowledgement. One of Suan's friends suggested Hao Yi might have cheated. However, Rayan dismissed the idea, confidently stating that no matter how challenging the exam, Hao Yi would never resort to cheating. It simply wasn't his nature. Ran then asked them all to leave. It wasn't just the students doubting Hao Yi. Some of the teachers still couldn't believe it either. When the announcement board showed Hao Yi's name at the top of the rankings, the students gathered around in shock, questioning whether he had actually refrained from cheating. Meanwhile, murmurs spread that Suan, the sports club president, had lost a bet. Suan stood nearby wearing the cosplay outfit and holding a brochure for the sports club with a forced smile. Male students immediately flocked to her, intrigued enough to consider joining the club. Suan's friends pitied her, blaming Hao Yi for the embarrassing situation. As Hao Yi approached her, he noticed for the first time that the outfit she wore was actually from an anime festival. Curious, he asked her how the clothes he'd given her were holding up. Suan complained that they were too tight. Hao Yi, unfazed, announced to everyone that Suan would be wearing that outfit while recruiting new members for her club. He leaned in and whispered to her, "From now on, it's all up to you." Suan then stepped forward, acting cute and cheerful to promote the sports club. Her performance earned praise from the onlookers, and Suan smiled with relief, even thanking Hao Yi. From afar, a girl watched them, wondering if Hao Yi had completely forgotten about his family. Later that evening, Hao Yi felt drained. He confided in Tata, telling her about the 2-week cosplay punishment he'd given Suan. Tata teased him, saying that he was already losing his edge with Suan, and that he couldn't use the same trick twice. Confused, Hao Yi pondered whether he needed a new plan. Suddenly, Zitao showed up and asked what was going on. Hao Yi dismissed her question, saying he was just feeling hot and trying to cool off. Right then, Suan arrived and threw the outfit Hao Yi had given her at his feet. Furious, she accused him of humiliating her because the clothes were clearly made for a child. Hao Yi tried to explain himself, turning to Zitao for backup, but Zitao, visibly nervous, excused herself, saying she had to leave for dinner with her dad. Seeing Hao Yi's apologetic face, Suan cracked a smile and told him she forgave him. Despite the bizarre circumstances, Suan admitted to herself that she felt happy. Hao Yi, too, smiled, reaffirming to himself that maybe there really wasn't anything wrong with a man being a little mischievous. The next day, while walking down the school hallway, Tata asked Hao Yi about who Shili had been talking about the previous night. Hao Yi replied that Shili was talking about her boyfriend. Tata was shocked, assuming Shili had been referring to Hao Yi. Laughing, Hao Yi clarified that he wasn't Shili's boyfriend. It was actually her ex-boyfriend she had been talking about. If it weren't for that guy, Shili wouldn't have ended up in her current situation. Out of nowhere, 2 little kids ran up to Hao Yi, calling him Dad. Hao Yi was utterly stunned, especially when Lin Yuan appeared alongside them. Yuan then said they were his children. This revelation shocked Hao Yi so much that he felt his soul leave his body, but Tata caught his spirit and put it back. Yuan explained that Hao Yi had left home and forgotten about his 2 children. Hao Yi remembered Yuan had once mentioned their children's names were Ming and Hong. Smiling behind Yuan, Tata seemed amused. Hao Yi quickly told her to keep quiet, adding he'd deal with her later. Misunderstanding, Yuan looked hurt, thinking Hao Yi was directing his harsh words at her. Hao Yi hurried to clarify that he wasn't speaking to Yuan. Yuan then asked if Hao Yi could come home that evening. Just then, Ming complained he was hungry. Hao Yi suggested that Yuan take Ming and Hong to get some food from the front of the school while he handled something important. He promised to meet them at the school gate and asked the kids to call him uncle while in public. After they left, Hao Yi confronted Tata, visibly irritated. He demanded to know how much more she was hiding from him and why she kept complicating his life. Tata apologized, saying she'd been too busy to inform him earlier. She explained that the contract's primary purpose was to fulfill the wishes of the girls involved. If time passed and the contract remained unfulfilled, the magic would activate and their wishes would automatically come true. Hao Yi was baffled and frustrated, struggling to comprehend how such a ridiculous rule could exist. Worse, fulfilling these contracts seemed to be cutting his lifespan in half. Tata calmly said it wasn't as bad as it seemed, and in Hao Yi's words, could simply be considered delusions manifesting. Meanwhile, Yuan showed Ming and Hong the school announcement board, pointing out that their dad, Hao Yi, was ranked first, while Yuan herself was second. Hong praised both of them for being so amazing. Ming quickly reminded Hong to refer to Hao Yi as uncle, and Hong nodded, agreeing to comply. Yuan then received a phone call asking her to report to the office immediately. Before leaving, she instructed Ming and Hong to stay put and not wander off. The 2 kids promised to follow her instructions. However, as soon as Yuan left, Ming dashed off, announcing he would find Hao Yi. Hong, alarmed, chased after him. When Yuan returned and found her children missing, she panicked and ran to Hao Yi to inform him. Apologizing profusely, Yuan explained that Ming and Han had disappeared while she was gone for a short time. Hao Yi reassured her, promising to search for them around the schoolyard. He asked Yuan to wait by the school gate, as the children might have returned there. Hao Yi assured her nothing bad would happen. Elsewhere, Zitao was strolling through the school grounds when she noticed Hong crying. She stopped and gently asked Hong why she was upset. Hong explained that she couldn't find her uncle. Zitao immediately offered to help her search, which made Hong light up with gratitude. Meanwhile, Ming had finished a canned drink and wandered into the school's chemistry lab. Imagining himself as a superhero, he accused the people inside of being villains who had kidnapped his dad. The lab workers, confused, told him to leave. But in Ming's mind, this was a battle against evil. He hurled marbles at them, one of which hit a chemical flask, causing a reaction. To Ming, this was a triumphant explosion signifying his victory. Afterward, Ming slid down the staircase railing, gleeful about his imaginary success. At the same time, Hao Yi was searching frantically for Ming. The school's operator spotted Ming on the CCTV and was shocked to see a child wandering around campus. They broadcasted an announcement about the child's presence, catching Hao Yi's attention. Two students walking nearby were discussing the announcement, and Hao Yi asked if they'd seen where the child had gone. They pointed him in a direction, and Hao Yi hurried off to search. Ironically, Ming passed right behind him while he was looking elsewhere. When Hao Yi heard the sound of a door closing, he quickly turned to look and realized it was the girls' locker room. Hesitating, he peeked inside, spotting Ming hiding under a table in the middle of the room where several girls were changing. Hao Yi wanted to go in and get Ming out, but he feared being attacked again for looking like a pervert. He even considered leaving Ming there, trusting that a little kid like him wouldn't do anything wrong. Suddenly, a hand tapped Hao Yi on the shoulder, startling him. It was Tang Xuan, who immediately demanded to know what he was doing sneaking around. Without waiting for an explanation, she punched him. Meanwhile, Zitao offered Hong a drink and learned that the uncle Hong was searching for was Hao Yi. This revelation delighted Zitao because it gave her another reason to approach him. She invited Hong to continue searching together, but their attention was caught by a group of students gossiping about Hao Yi causing trouble in the gym. Worried, Zitao decided they needed to check it out. Back in the locker room, Hao Yi had been caught peeking and was now surrounded by angry girls. He tried to explain, saying the situation wasn't what they thought, but Suan interrupted him, demanding an apology. If Hao Yi apologized to the girls, Suan said she would let him go. Hao Yi begged them to hear his explanation, but the crowd wasn't interested. Just then, Ming appeared, declaring he would rescue Hao Yi. He ran into the room and pulled on Suan's clothes, startling her and causing her to hastily cover herself. One of the students pointed out that Ming was the child who had caused all the commotion. Hao Yi pleaded with the girls not to blame Ming and insisted they hold him accountable instead. Zitao and Hong arrived at the scene, and Hong immediately ran to Ming. A friend of Suan accused Hao Yi of being a voyeur and threatened to attack him. Hao Yi, forgetting his own predicament, tried to act like a hero for Ming. Suan told her friends to teach Hao Yi a lesson. While all of this unfolded, Yuan waited at the school gate until the dismissal bell rang. Hao Yi eventually showed up with Ming and Hong and Tao. Yuan immediately hugged the children, relieved they were safe. Hao Yi reassured her that there was nothing to worry about. They were fine. Out of nowhere, Tata appeared, calling Hao Yi an exhausted parent and offering to give him a special reward by lightly pounding on his back. Hao Yi suggested it would feel better if she massaged his shoulders instead. Hearing this, Yuan stood up and began massaging Hao Yi's shoulders, but Hao Yi quickly told her he wasn't asking her to do it. Hao Yi then told Yuan there was something important she needed to understand. He asked her to take a good look at Ming and Hong, who appeared to be around 7 or 8 years old. Yuan nodded. Hao Yi pointed out that neither of them was even 20 years old yet. He asked Yuan to think about the math. 20 minus 8 equals 12. It was impossible for him to have fathered those kids at 12 years old. But Yuan remained convinced that Ming and Hong were their children. Hao Yi couldn't understand how she could believe such a thing. Tata chimed in, explaining that it was the power of magic. Hao Yi demanded Tata undo the magic immediately, but she warned him that if she did, Yuan would lose her sense of self. Everyone interacting with Yuan had already fallen under the magic's influence, including possibly her family. Yuan, unaware of Tata's presence, asked who Hao Yi was talking to. Hao Yi brushed it off, offering to take her home. Yuan hesitated, but eventually admitted she didn't mind him coming back, though she didn't know how to react after he'd been gone for so long. Still, she thought it would be a good idea for him to come home. The group walked together to Yuan's house. At the door, Yuan knocked while Hao Yi nervously wondered if her family had been affected by the magic or not. When the door opened, a knife flew past, narrowly missing Hao Yi. Yuan, unfazed, asked her mother what she was cooking because it smelled delicious. Her mother, glaring sharply at Hao Yi, coldly said, "So you finally decided to come home." That evening, Hao Yi returned to Yuan's house, where he was greeted by a knife thrown by Yuan's mother. She angrily called him a scoundrel. The magic's influence had altered her memories. Hao Yi tried to address her as auntie, but Yuan's mother quickly corrected him, demanding he call her mother. She scolded Hao Yi for being away from home for several days, questioning if he'd forgotten how to properly address her, and insisted he say it again. Yuan's mother continued to berate Hao Yi, while Yuan tried to shield Ming and Hong's eyes from witnessing the scene. Yuan asked her mother to stop because Ming and Hong needed to finish their homework after dinner. Reluctantly, her mother backed down, told Hao Yi to come inside, and invited him to dinner. Hao Yi thanked her, almost addressing her as auntie again, but quickly corrected himself, calling her mother. It was Hao Yi's first time seeing Yuan's modest home. Yuan prepared dinner and warmly welcomed Hao Yi back. Meanwhile, in her room, Zitao was debating how to approach Hao Yi. She wanted to invite him on a date next Sunday, but couldn't muster the courage to ask him directly. She considered calling him, but worried it might disturb him, especially if he was already asleep. She also feared rejection if she brought it up. Zitao felt utterly confused about what to do. Back at Yuan's house, Hao Yi suddenly sneezed, a sign someone might be thinking about him. Yuan asked if he had caught a cold. Hong innocently suggested that Hao Yi would feel better if Yuan kissed him. Embarrassed, Yuan told the kids not to say such things and instructed them to finish their chores. While cleaning, Yuan and Hao Yi's hands accidentally touched, making them both feel awkward. Yuan's mother noticed the subtle interaction and announced that she was heading to her aerobics class at the plaza and would be back late. Ming asked Hao Yi for help with his homework, explaining that he had been trying to solve the problems every night. Yuan told the kids to go to bed soon and not to bother Hao Yi, but the children were eager to play with him since it was Saturday the next day. Unexpectedly, Yuan began changing her clothes in front of Hao Yi. Flustered, Hao Yi quickly urged the kids to follow Yuan's instructions and head to bed. He then left the room to watch TV. On the news, a segment aired about a young unmarried couple in their 20s who had eaten forbidden fruit. Hao Yi was puzzled by the relevance of such a story. Yuan, now dressed in a revealing outfit, approached Hao Yi and suggested he rest since she doubted her mother would return that night. Hao Yi was startled and wondered if Yuan was implying he should share a bed with her. The thought overwhelmed him. Yuan apologized for the house being too warm and began fanning Hao Yi. Her kindness and gentle nature struck him, and for a brief moment, Hao Yi thought he'd be lucky if Yuan were his wife, but he quickly shook the thought from his head. Noticing Hao Yi suddenly banging his head, Yuan asked if he was uncomfortable staying at her house. As she moved closer, Hao Yi's heart raced. Just then, his phone rang, breaking the tension. Hao Yi told Yuan he needed to take the call. It was Zitao. She apologized for calling so late, asking if she was disturbing him. Hao Yi reassured her she wasn't and asked why she was calling. Zitao shyly asked if Hao Yi was free on Sunday and invited him to Heizu Amusement Park. Hao Yi agreed to the plan. Unbeknownst to him, Yuan had overheard the conversation and was standing right behind him. She asked what was going on. Startled, Hao Yi stammered that someone had simply asked him to return home. Yuan then asked Hao Yi to promise her that he would take the kids to Heizu Amusement Park on Sunday, since it had been a long time since they'd gone anywhere together. Hao Yi was confused because he had already agreed to meet Zitao on Sunday. He felt torn, caught between two conflicting thoughts. On one hand, he had to take care of the kids since they were supposedly his, and as a father, he couldn't neglect his responsibilities. On the other hand, Hao Yi realized that these children weren't actually part of his life, and he needed to make Zitao, the beautiful and wealthy woman, fall in love with him. That way, Hao Yi's position would dramatically rise to the top. His mind was racing back and forth between whether to spend the day with Yuan or with Zitao. In the end, Hao Yi decided to go with Yuan. Yuan, however, reiterated that they would be bringing the kids along. Meanwhile, Zitao was busy picking out an outfit for her date with Hao Yi. Suddenly, Hao Yi called her. He apologized for calling so late, but Zitao said it was fine since she hadn't gone to sleep yet. Hao Yi was about to explain his plans for Sunday, but paused when he remembered what Zitao's maid had said, that Zitao didn't have many friends and often felt sad being alone at home. Suddenly, Zitao started crying and said that if Hao Yi was too busy, he didn't have to come. Hao Yi immediately decided that he wouldn't be late and reminded Zitao not to be late either. Zitao smiled, and Hao Yi couldn't believe how those words came out of his mouth so naturally. As Hao Yi walked home, Yuan told him to be careful on the road. Hao Yi, walking home, was deep in thought, realizing he had to handle both situations at the same time. Sunday arrived. By 8:50 a.m., Hao Yi, Yuan, and the kids had already arrived at Haeju Amusement Park. Ming and Hong were really excited to see all the rides there. It wasn't long before the clock hit 9 o'clock a.m., marking the start of Hao Yi's operation. Ming asked which ride they would go on first. Hao Yi suggested they start with the Ferris wheel to get a view from the top. They were amazed by how high the ride went. Hao Yi had already planned everything out. He needed to meet Zi Tao at 10 o'clock a.m. So the plan was to take them on one ride after another for the next hour. While riding the water wheel, Hao Yi got scared and accidentally hugged someone's leg, thinking it was a pole. The person turned out to be someone's boyfriend, and he got angry at Hao Yi for grabbing his leg. Hao Yi quickly let go. Yuan was upset and asked what Hao Yi had done in front of the kids. She immediately scolded him. When they got off the water wheel, it was 9:27 a.m., meaning Hao Yi didn't have much time left. Yuan asked if he was okay. Hao Yi reassured her that he was fine and suggested they continue with the next rides. They went on various attractions, spinning teacups, swings, roller coasters, and other extreme rides, until 9:53 a.m. After all those rides, Hao Yi felt really nauseous. Yuan asked if he was alright, but Hao Yi couldn't answer. He just covered his mouth and rushed to throw up. Suddenly, food started raining down on Hao Yi. Tata appeared and commented, saying life was short, so why was Hao Yi suffering like this? She said all the food was for him. Hao Yi, irritated, told Tata not to mess with him. Then, a watermelon fell on his head. Tata explained that she came to offer advice, but Hao Yi hadn't even thanked her. Hao Yi replied that he didn't have time to talk to her since he only had 10 minutes left and needed to meet Zi Tao. Tata asked if Hao Yi was sure about his plan and if he needed help. Hao Yi responded by saying Tata shouldn't underestimate people, and from then on, he just wanted to follow his lead. Hao Yi's plan was simple. At 9:53 a.m., he would sneak out of the souvenir shop. At 9:55 a.m., he would jump the fence from the alley to the plaza. At 9:57 a.m., he would pass through the carousel area. At 9:58 a.m., he would quickly pass the vendors. At 9:59 a.m., Hao Yi would still have 1 minute to meet Zi Tao. Hao Yi hopes Zi Tao would be like most girls and show up a little late for a date. That would give him just enough time to fix his hair. Finally, at 10 o'clock a.m., Hao Yi met Zi Tao. It was exactly 9:59 a.m. and Hao Yi still had 1 minute left before meeting Zi Tao. He thought Zi Tao would probably be like most girls and show up a little late for their date. Finally, Hao Yi arrived on time to meet her. Apologizing for making Zi Tao wait, he was surprised when she said it was her fault for arriving too early. For Zi Tao, the date that day was incredibly special because there was something important she wanted to share. Hao Yi began to wonder if that important thing might be a confession. Zi Tao, on the other hand, felt unsure of what to do. She thought about confessing her feelings to Hao Yi but felt too nervous to go through with it. Just as Zi Tao was debating with herself about whether or not to confess, someone suddenly approached them. The person mentioned that the amusement park was holding a photography event and asked if they were interested in having their picture taken. They advised Hao Yi and Zi Tao not to look too stiff, since it wasn't supposed to be like an ID photo. The photographer even asked them to stand closer together, saying couples should look intimate. As Hao Yi and Zi Tao moved closer, the photographer insisted they get even closer, adding, "Aren't couples supposed to look affectionate?" Hao Yi thought the photographer must have assumed they were a couple. He couldn't help but wonder, could someone as wealthy and elegant as Zi Tao really fall for me? Then, to his surprise, Zi Tao posed by hugging Hao Yi and asked if that was the kind of pose the photographer had in mind. The photographer gave a thumbs up and prepared to take their photo. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew Zi Tao's hat off and Hao Yi instinctively caught it. In doing so, his face accidentally moved closer to hers. Zi Tao smiled, thanked him, and unexpectedly kissed him. Hao Yi rushed to the restroom to splash water on his face. He was puzzled by Zi Tao's behavior. Why did she kiss me all of a sudden? He found it hard to believe that the most beautiful girl in school could like him. It seemed impossible and made no sense at all. Out of nowhere, Tata appeared and teased Hao Yi, calling him a fool and saying even a god wouldn't be able to save him. Hao Yi asked if it was all just a coincidence. After all, everything he did was just to help Zi Tao, so there was no reason for her to fall for him. It simply didn't make sense. If it were true, then all the single guys in the world would be doomed. Hao Yi concluded it must be the effect of the chocolate cake. But Tata rolled her eyes and insisted that the chocolate had nothing to do with Zi Tao's actions. She called Hao Yi stubborn and reminded him she had explained everything to him before. Tata then asked, "Don't you realize all the girls are into you? All their affection is piling up and it's only a matter of time." Hao Yi suddenly remembered he was almost out of time. Yuan and the kids were probably still waiting for him. He quickly headed to the souvenir shop to pick out some gifts. As he browsed through the items trying to choose the perfect ones for the kids, Zhang Dong appeared and called out to him. Zhang Dong asked what Hao Yi was doing there. He then said there was something serious he needed to discuss. Hao Yi sensed it was something important. Zhang Dong explained that Du Yus had returned from America and he was certain Yus would hurt Shili again. Zhang Dong declared that no matter what, he wouldn't let that happen. Hao Yi tried to calm him down, saying there was no guarantee things would turn out the way Zhang Dong imagined. Zhang Dong then surprised Hao Yi by saying he was entrusting Shili to him. Hao Yi protested, pointing out that Zhang Dong was the one who liked Shili, so he should be the one to handle it. Zhang Dong hesitated and explained he couldn't go because of his friend's wife, adding, "I'm not that kind of guy." He placed his trust in Hao Yi to look out for Shili. Just then, Hao Yi noticed Suan in the same store. He called out to her, and she asked why he was there. Hao Yi explained he was talking to his friend, but Suan's companion didn't believe him. They accused Hao Yi of being a pervert, insisting he must have been following Suan. Hao Yi denied it, trying to convince them it wasn't what they thought. Suddenly, Zitao called him. At that moment, Hao Yi found himself dealing with 3 women at once: Zitao, Suan, and Yuan. He was racking his brain over how to divide his time between them, especially since both Zitao and Yuan had been waiting for him for quite some time. He had no idea what to do. Suan noticed Hao Yi's restless expression and asked why he seemed so anxious and what was on his mind. Without hesitation, Hao Yi grabbed Suan's hand and said he needed her help. Suan's friend, however, became furious and immediately told Hao Yi to let go of Suan's hand, thinking he was doing something inappropriate to her. Hao Yi tried to explain that it was just a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, Zitao kept calling him, but Hao Yi wasn't answering. Zitao began to wonder if she had scared Hao Yi away. Feeling uneasy, she decided to leave. Just as she was about to go, someone appeared in front of her. She thought it was Hao Yi, but it turned out to be Suan. Surprised, Zitao asked why Suan was there. Suan explained that Hao Yi had something urgent to take care of and was in a big rush, so he had asked her to keep Zitao company. Suan also admitted she was curious about what Hao Yi was up to. Zitao thanked Suan for staying with her. Suan sat down next to Zitao and told her not to worry about Hao Yi. She complimented Zitao's outfit, saying she looked beautiful that day, then asked if Zitao and Hao Yi were on a date. Embarrassed, Zitao quickly clarified that they weren't dating and had only run into each other by chance. Suan chuckled and said Zitao didn't need to explain herself. Smiling, she teased that she felt guilty for stealing time that Zitao could have spent alone with Hao Yi. In truth, Suan was frustrated with Hao Yi but tried not to show it. Zitao, in turn, complimented Suan, saying she looked lovely too. Suan dismissed the compliment, saying she wasn't dressed up since she was only there to relax. Zitao teased her, pointing out that she looked a little shy, but Suan refused to admit it. She instead invited Zitao to have some fun together. Meanwhile, Hao Yi had made it to the carousel, where he met up with the kids. He handed them stuffed animals as gifts and apologized for making them wait so long. However, Hao Yi was surprised to see Hong crying. Yuan explained that Hong had wanted to win an ice cream for Ming in a coloring contest, but didn't succeed. Hao Yi reassured Hong, telling her not to worry because he would buy ice cream for them instead. Yuan suddenly commented that since Hao Yi had recently been laid off from his job, it must be tough for him to adjust. She urged him not to push himself too hard. Just then, Ming spoke up, saying she didn't want ice cream anymore. Yuan smiled warmly and called Ming a sweet child. Watching the touching scene between them, Hao Yi felt a mix of emotions. He understood Yuan's struggles and helplessness, but was also moved by the children's kindness and thoughtfulness. Determined to lift their spirits, Hao Yi suggested that he and Ming try to win the ice cream together. With renewed enthusiasm, Hao Yi, Yuan, and the kids put their hands together and cheered as a team. Nearby, an announcement was made for a parent and child quiz competition about to begin. Parents and their children started getting ready for the event. The host took the stage and prepared to ask the first question. What does DNA stand for? Hao Yi quickly pressed the buzzer and answered the question correctly. The next question was, how many dreams are described in the literary work Dream of the Red Chamber, a classic from the Qing dynasty? Hao Yi immediately gave the answer without hesitation. Other participants objected, claiming they hadn't even heard the full question before Hao Yi answered. Ming, however, beamed with pride, declaring Hao Yi was amazing. The other participants were puzzled when Hao Yi correctly answered a question about Cameroon being in the UTC+1 time zone. Han jumped for joy as Hao Yi continued to answer every question correctly. Then came the next question. Where is the black box located? Hao Yi answered confidently, at the tail of the plane. The quiz organizers were astonished at Hao Yi's ability to nail every question so effortlessly. Hao Yi eagerly awaited their best question yet. Finally, the last question came. How many chromosomes does a panda have? Without missing a beat, Hao Yi answered 21 pairs. He even stepped forward to the quiz table to ensure his answer was heard. The organizers, a bit flustered, reminded him that it was just a small competition, and there was no need to take it so seriously. Nevertheless, they awarded him a meal voucher as the prize for winning the quiz. Hao Yi and the kids were thrilled about the victory. They headed to eat together, with the kids overjoyed at finally getting their ice cream. Yuan smiled and remarked how happy the children were that day, all thanks to Hao Yi. She expressed her gratitude to him. Hao Yi, a bit surprised, replied that he hadn't realized it was all because of him. Yuan continues, saying that even though Hao Yi was afraid of heights, he still took the kids on the Ferris wheel and roller coaster. Despite having no income, he worked hard to give the kids what they wanted. Hao Yi quickly told her not to say such things, as it was only natural for them to have fun. They were his kids after all. Yuan suddenly fell silent, leaving Hao Yi confused and wondering if he had said something wrong. Finally, Yuan spoke up, saying that Hao Yi was truly calm and reserved. She commented that Hao Yi reminded her so much of someone else. Hao Yi doubted it was about an ex and thought to himself that this might be the perfect chance, right here and right now. Zitao and Suan spent time together at the amusement park at Hao Yi's request. Suan suggested they visit a store, but Zitao remained silent, looking downcast. Suan warned her that if she stayed gloomy, she'd leave her behind. She also mentioned that the outfit she was wearing was quite popular. Zitao apologized and then made an adorable cosplay-like gesture, which made Suan burst into laughter. By chance, they spotted Hao Yi with Yuan and the children. At that moment, Yuan told Hao Yi that she was taking the kids shopping. Hao Yi said he would catch up with them later. After Yuan left, Suan called out to Hao Yi and asked what exactly he was up to. Suan and Zitao dragged Hao Yi to the restroom, where Suan demanded an explanation. Suan tied Hao Yi up and began interrogating him, visibly annoyed because she felt Hao Yi was using her. She accused him of asking her to accompany Zitao just so he could spend time with Yuan. Hao Yi insisted that she had misunderstood him. He explained that his encounter with Yuan was purely coincidental. Suan wasn't entirely convinced because both she and Zitao had clearly seen Hao Yi with Yuan, whose eyes were red as if she had been crying. Holding a broom close to Hao Yi's face, Suan demanded that he tell her the truth about what had happened. Hao Yi explained what transpired at the cafe. He had asked Yuan why he had never heard her talk about her father. He told her she didn't have to carry all the burdens alone and admitted he had only just realized that Yuan came from a single-parent family. He pointed out how her mother worked so hard to support them and asked whether her father cared at all about his wife and children. Hao Yi also questioned whether her father sent any financial support, considering the family's situation, and if it was possible that he would never return to see her again. Yuan, visibly upset, slammed the table, startling everyone in the cafe. Hao Yi explained that he had only intended to catch her off guard to get her to open up. That way he could help her. But Yuan ended up crying, refusing to explain anything, perhaps because she wasn't ready to share. That's the real story, Hao Yi said. He admitted that he had only meant well for Yuan. Suan asked if he was telling the truth. Hao Yi nodded and insisted that he had never lied. Zitao expressed sympathy for Yuan and Suan agreed. She admitted she hadn't realized that Yuan was a single parent raising her two younger siblings, whom they had seen earlier. Suan remarked that Hao Yi's words about Yuan's father were like pouring salt on an open wound. She added that it must be incredibly tough for Yuan to take care of her siblings and wake up early every day. Hao Yi shouted, asking to be untied. Suan eventually let him go, acknowledging that Hao Yi's meeting with Yuan was a coincidence and that Yuan had genuinely needed help. However, she warned him that if he ever lied to her again, she wouldn't forgive him. Hao Yi agreed. Zitao urged Hao Yi to support Yuan and even offered to help if he needed anything. Hao Yi hurried off to catch up with Yuan. Later, while Suan and Zitao were at the cafe, Suan asked Zitao why she had let Hao Yi leave like that and whether she was okay with him being with Yuan. Zitao replied that Yuan was in a tough spot and that Hao Yi was determined to help her, so there was no point in holding him back. Suan was moved and remarked how incredible it was, especially since Hao Yi and Zitao had been on a date. Zitao quickly denied it, saying they hadn't been on a date and that meeting Hao Yi had been purely coincidental. Her flustered response made Suan laugh. Suan told Zitao there was no need to explain anything to her. Meanwhile, Hao Yi, Yuan, and the kids were at an aquarium watching fish. Yuan reminded the kids to be careful so they wouldn't fall. Hao Yi was about to apologize to Yuan for their conversation at the cafe, but Yuan reassured him that he wasn't at fault. She understood that Hao Yi just wanted to know the truth. When a photographer passed by, Hao Yi asked if he could take a few pictures of them. They ended up taking photos together. Ming and Hong were overjoyed that day. The photographer was surprised to hear the kids calling Hao Yi dad and wondered about his relationship with the girl he had seen him with earlier. Later, Hao Yi accompanied them back home. Yoon thanked Hao Yi for making the day so enjoyable for her and the kids. Hao Yi tried to apologize again, but Yoon told him not to blame himself. She knew his intentions were good. However, she asked him not to tell her mother about their earlier conversation. Hao Yi agreed. Yoon went inside and said goodnight to Hao Yi. As Hao Yi stood there, he wondered if he had gone too far. He realized he couldn't learn anything directly from Yuan's mother and didn't know what to do next. Just thinking about meeting Yuan's mother made him anxious. He took out a photo from his pocket. It was the picture they had taken together earlier. Hao Yi recalled what Tata had once said, that memories created by illusions often had some connection to reality, and that the truth was often hidden within those false memories. Hao Yi figured he would need to start by learning more about the people close to Yuan. The next day, Hao Yi went to the grade school Yuan used to attend. He wanted to investigate there. As he was about to step inside, the school's security guard stopped him. The guard said that not just anyone could enter the school and asked where Hao Yi was from. Hao Yi casually replied that he was just a young pioneer and tried to walk in. The guard chased after him, yelling at Hao Yi not to run. Hao Yi dashed through the hallways until he reached the teacher's lounge. Certain that Yuan's homeroom teacher would be there, he burst into the room and immediately asked if the teacher was present. All the teachers in the room glared at him. They asked who he was and why he was out of class during school hours. They even demanded to see his identification. The school security officer arrived just in time and grabbed Hao Yi, who had caused quite a commotion. Hao Yi tried to explain that they had misunderstood him and that he was only looking for Yuan's homeroom teacher. They didn't believe him and accused him of lying, thinking he was just trying to cause trouble. The security guard finally caught up to Hao Yi, but Hao Yi managed to escape again. While running, he accidentally bumped into a female teacher. In his panic, Hao Yi reflexively grabbed her chest, making her scream and punch him. Hao Yi immediately apologized and explained that he was just looking for Yuan's homeroom teacher. It turned out that the teacher Hao Yi bumped into did know Yuan. They ended up talking in the back garden of the school. The teacher shared that she had been teaching at the school for 10 years. She remembered Yuan as a bright and active student and recalled how, rain or shine, Yuan's father used to pick her up after school. She recounted a particular day when Yuan's father said goodbye to her before leaving. Yuan cried as she chased after him and even fell down in the process. Yuan's parents had divorced and her father never returned after that. Ever since, Yuan had waited for him but grew increasingly sad as time passed. Hao Yi asked if the teacher could help him find Yuan's father's address. He even begged her to assist him. That evening, Hao Yi met up with Tata. Tata teased him, but Hao Yi's expression was unusually serious. It was clear that Yuan's situation was still weighing on his mind. Tata found it strange. She pointed out that while Hao Yi wanted to uncover the truth about Yuan, he didn't want to hurt her. Yet he couldn't approach Yuan's mother, which meant daydreaming about the situation wouldn't accomplish anything. Finally, Hao Yi decided to resort to a last-ditch effort. That night, he went to the police station. Turning off the lights, he slipped into a room and quietly opened the door. A police officer, noticing the door moving on its own, got up to investigate. The officer felt a presence nearby and started looking around. Hao Yi got arrested by the police and was interrogated at the station. They asked him about his identity. Hao Yi was treated like a criminal, and the officers warned him it wouldn't be easy to get out of jail. His terrified face made the officers laugh, and one of them even hugged him, revealing that it was actually Yan, Hao Yi's friend. Hao Yi told Yan he needed help finding someone. Yan gave him some information about Yuan but warned Hao Yi to just look at it and not share it, as it was confidential. Yan teased Hao Yi, asking if he had a thing for Yuan. Hao Yi denied it, explaining that he only wanted to know about Yuan's father. However, when Yan checked, there was no record of him. Yan suggested that Yuan's father might have moved to another country, which would make it much harder to track him down. Still, Hao Yi insisted he would keep searching. Yan promised to keep looking and let Hao Yi know if he found anything. As Hao Yi was leaving, Tata suddenly appeared. She joked that not many people could walk into a police station like that. She asked if Hao Yi was the son of a mafia boss or just some delinquent, mentioning how he once got beaten up by a mob. She even sarcastically asked if the food in jail was any good. Hao Yi, annoyed, scolded her, accusing her of just messing with him. He was fed up with her antics. When Hao Yi got home, he announced he was hungry, but his parents stayed silent. Sensing something was off, Hao Yi asked if a burglar had broken in. His father told him that a real man stays calm in every situation. Hao Yi joked, asking if his dad had lost all their money in the stock market. but his father said it was worse than that. He then told Hao Yi to prepare himself because someone was coming over that night. Hao Yi asked if it was a debt collector and suggested they call the police. Just then, Shili walked in, asking why Hao Yi wanted to call the cops. Hao Yi was stunned to see her. Shili said she hadn't seen him in a while and asked if he missed her. Without waiting for an answer, she grabbed Hao Yi and pulled him to his room. Hao Yi begged his parents for help, but instead, his dad grabbed his hand and told him it was time to test his strength. Hao Yi, shocked, thought he was being rescued, but his dad let go and Shili dragged him into the room. In the room, Shili said she couldn't wait any longer. Hao Yi, confused, asked what she was planning. Shili hugged him and said they would play horsey that night. Panicking, Hao Yi screamed for his parents, but they didn't intervene. Desperate, he excused himself to the bathroom and told Shili to go to sleep first. After spending 3 hours in the bathroom, he returned to find Shili sound asleep. Watching her, Hao Yi thought she looked beautiful when she was calm. Suddenly, Shili mumbled his name in her sleep and Hao Yi couldn't help but smile. It reminded him of their grade school days when Shili had given him a lunchbox she made. She said it was meant for the 6th grade class president, but she gave it to Hao Yi out of pity. Right after handing it over, she left. That memory was a sweet one for Hao Yi. With morning approaching, Hao Yi decided it was too late to sleep, so he stayed up. While staring at a photo from an amusement park trip, he began wondering what Yuan was doing. Though he felt tired, he found himself enjoying the moment for some reason. Maybe that's how Yuan felt about being a parent. At 4 a.m., Yan called and told Hao Yi he had found information about Yuan's father, Lin Yujia, and even got 20 phone numbers. Just as Hao Yi was about to leave, Shili hugged him and asked what he was doing making calls in the middle of the night. Hao Yi didn't know when Shili had woken up, but she started trying to take off his pants. The next morning at school, Hao Yi was still groggy since he'd only slept for 2 hours. Suddenly, Shili greeted him and said that last night was so much fun, adding that they should continue on the bed tonight. Everyone in the class stared at them in shock. Without giving Hao Yi a chance to explain, his classmates yelled at him and ganged up to beat him. Yuan overheard the commotion and got upset, thinking Hao Yi was cheating on her again. Poor Hao Yi, just when he thought he could relax for a bit. Later, Hao Yi started calling the phone numbers Yan had given him. The first number was inactive. When he called the second, someone answered but mistook him for an insurance agent. The third number connected, but when Hao Yi asked if it was Yujia, the person on the line said there was no Yujia and started offering names like Andy and Mike. Panicking, Hao Yi quickly hung up. He tried several more numbers, but they were all wrong. Only one number was left. Hao Yi called it, and this time the number was active. Meanwhile, a woman walked into her boss's office and told him he had a call on one of his rarely used lines. The boss explained that it was his private line and forbade her from answering it. Hao Yi waited, confused as to why no one was picking up, and eventually fell asleep. After school, Hao Yi tried calling the last number again, determined to keep trying until someone answered. At that time, Yujia was at a supermarket and his phone was ringing. People around him pointed it out, prompting Yujia to finally answer. Hao Yi asked if this was really Yujia. Yujia replied by asking who Hao Yi was and how he got his number. Hao Yi confidently said he was Yujia's son-in-law. Shocked, Yujia said that couldn't be true since Yuan wasn't married. Hao Yi laughed and admitted it wasn't true, but added that they already had 2 kids, leaving Yujia even more shocked. Hao Yi then told Yujia that he had been gone for years and that Yuan missed him deeply. He pleaded with Yujia to come back and see his grandchildren. Yujia explained that he was living abroad, but the supermarket then made an announcement about a missing item in the local language. This made Hao Yi suspect that Yujia was still in the country. Hao Yi told him that Yuan just wanted to see her father again and that hiding wouldn't solve anything. He reminded Yujia that it had been 10 years since he left and that Yuan hadn't seen him since. Hao Yi even questioned whether a man should abandon his responsibilities like that. But Yujia revealed something shocking. Yuan wasn't his biological daughter. Hao Yi was stunned and accidentally dropped his phone. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Suddenly, Tata appeared and asked if Hao Yi still wanted to keep searching after learning the truth. Hao Yi walked to Yuan's house, his mind replaying Yujia's words. The revelation was unexpected, and Hao Yi felt he needed to ask Yuan's mother directly. He just wanted to understand what had happened. When he reached Yuan's house, he overheard her mother yelling at her. Her mother told Yuan to throw away the photo in her wallet, but Yuan refused. Her mother angrily declared that Yuan's father had been dead for a long time. Hao Yi was shocked. Yuan rushed out of the house, with children crying and chasing after her. Yuan's mother then stepped outside and asked Hao Yi what he wanted. Hao Yi explained that he came to talk to her, but she said she wasn't in the mood to talk when she was angry. Hao Yi then asked about Yujia, certain that Yuan's mother knew how much Yuan missed her father. Yoon's mother questioned how Hao-yi knew about Yujia, asking if Yoon had told him. Then she asked Hao-yi to leave her alone and went back inside. Desperate, Hao-yi banged on the door, begging her to tell him the truth. Yoon's mother refused, saying the conversation was over. Hao-yi kept pleading, asking for a reason. Suddenly, an elderly woman appeared and told Hao-yi to leave Yoon's mother alone. She whispered something to Hao-yi, which left him utterly shocked. Afterward, Hao-yi went off to be alone. Tata approached him and asked if he had learned the truth about Yuan's situation. Hao-yi said he didn't want to deal with it anymore. Hao-yi told Tata that he didn't want to deal with Yuan's issues anymore. In the past, Yuan's mother, Xiao Sin, married Xiao-he, who was a surgeon. Shortly after Xiao was called to duty, Sin waited eagerly for his return. But when her wish was finally granted, he came back lifeless. Everyone expressed their condolences to Sin, and his comrades said he was a hero. Things became even more difficult because Sin was pregnant with Yuan at the time. Sin considered Yuan to be a gift left behind by her late husband and vowed to raise her child healthfully. Fortunately, Yujia, a man who had once pursued Sin, was by her side and willing to care for her and the child she was carrying. Tata then asked why Sin and he had chosen to divorce. Hao-yi explained that not everyone could understand their kind of love. It turned out Yujia's family didn't accept Sin or her child. Yujia's parents scolded him for marrying Sin behind their backs. They even disowned Yujia, threatening to kick him out unless he divorced Sin. They refused to acknowledge him as their family. After years of estrangement from his family, Yujia eventually decided to change his approach. He tearfully asked Sin for a separation because his parents were aging and he needed to take care of them. At that moment, there was nothing Sin or Yuan could do. Hao-yi had heard this entire story from an elderly woman who lived next door to Yuan. At first, he didn't believe it, but one of his friends confirmed it was true. Yuan's father had indeed been a surgeon who died in the line of duty. Tata commented that if all of that were true, it was hard to blame anyone for what happened. She could understand why Yujia hadn't come back to see Yuan. Hao-yi's expression soured, and he said he no longer cared about Yuan's family issues and didn't want anything to do with it. Tata asked if Hao-yi was giving up just like that. She pointed out that the fact Yujia still kept his old phone meant he still cared about Sin and Yuan. Hao-yi disagreed. He said they were all irresponsible. Yuan's mother, despite working in a dangerous field, had pushed forward with her commitment, which only brought chaos to others. Yujia, on the other hand, should have respected his marriage vows. He couldn't just come and go as he pleased. Hao-yi argued that even if he managed to bring Yujia back, it would be pointless. Tata grew curious about why Hao-yi was so upset. Hao-yi said he couldn't understand why Yuan's mother had chosen to trust Yujia. He was sure she had prepared herself for everything she went through and the consequences that came with it, meaning she had to shoulder it all alone. There was no one else to blame. Hao-yi was still angry because, if that was the case, why was he even involved in their problems? Tata reminded him that he had already done his best. She asked if police officers weren't allowed to marry and have children. Yujia had taken on the burden of a broken family and raised Yuan for years. Wasn't that proof that Yujia loved Yuan's mother and Yuan herself? Hao-yi asked Tata to stop following him. Tata couldn't understand what was really going on with Hao-yi. That night, Hao-yi went home with a gloomy expression. His mother greeted him and told him to wash his hands before dinner. His father asked why he was late again. Frustrated, Hao-yi snapped, asking since when they had started caring about him. His parents were shocked by his response. Hao-yi's mother guessed that he might be dealing with something heavy lately. She suggested that her husband try talking to him, but Hao-yi's father said that their son was an adult and could handle his problems on his own. Suddenly, there was a commotion from Hao-yi's room. He had thrown all of his books onto the floor and a photo from an amusement park outing accidentally fell down. Hao-yi picked it up and realized he shouldn't have taken out his anger on Yuan's family. He felt deeply ashamed of himself, especially since he had even argued with Tata over the issue. Hao-yi thought he was pathetic. For Yuan's family and for himself, he knew he couldn't give up so easily. He wondered if Tata also blamed him. Suddenly, Tata appeared and asked Hao-yi if he hadn't said he didn't want to come back. Hao-yi was startled, and Tata added that a man should keep his word. Hao-yi snapped at her, telling her not to show up unannounced and especially not to eavesdrop from outside. Both of them ended up laughing together. The next day, Hao-yi called Yujia again. Yujia told Hao-yi not to call him anymore, saying he was busy and in the middle of a meeting. Hao-yi apologized for being so forward and said he now understood the situation between Yujia and Yuan's mother. Yujia was relieved to hear that Hao-yi finally got what he had been feeling. However, Hao-yi continued, saying that as an outsider he could sympathize with Yujia, but as a man, running away wasn't the right way to solve a problem. Hao-yi pointed out that Yujia had kept the same phone number for years. Wasn't that proof that he still cared about Yuan and her mother? Hagi added that Yuan really wanted to be with Yujia and that Yuan's mother was struggling. At a time like this, they really needed Yujia. Without another word, Yujia hung up the phone. Tata encouraged Hao-yi to keep trying. Meanwhile, Suan had taken on a part-time job at a cafe to help fund her sports club. Zitao kept ordering drinks repeatedly just to talk to Suan. All Zitao wanted was to chat with Suan for a bit longer. However, Suan declined, explaining she was working. Undeterred, Zitao ordered 3 more cups of coffee so she could keep talking to Suan. Suan scolded her, warning that drinking too much coffee could make her pass out. Her boss immediately reprimanded Suan, prompting her to treat Zitao more politely. Suan asked why Zitao didn't just spend time with Hao-yi instead. Zitao mentioned that Hao-yi had been acting strangely lately. She'd often seen him on the phone with someone. As Suan brought Zitao's coffee order, she asked if there was anything else Zitao needed. Zitao mentioned that her father wanted to talk to her next week and admitted she had no idea what to do. She asked Suan to help her come up with an idea. Suan brushed her off, saying the cafe wasn't the place for counseling. Zitao finally left and Suan returned to work, muttering to herself that Zitao might actually be drunk or maybe drinking so much coffee could have the same effect. The next day, Hao-yi tried calling Yujia again, but the number couldn't be reached. Hao-yi guessed Yujia was upset about being constantly contacted. Tata remarked that despite all the calls, Yujia hadn't blocked Hao-yi's number yet, so maybe he didn't mind as much as he let on. Hao-yi then asked Tata if no girls had come to bother him during the 2-week summer break. He wondered if the magic had worn off, or if only 3 of them had eaten the cake. Tata teased him for hoping too much. She explained that under normal circumstances, the love magic followed certain boundaries, meaning it only worked within specific areas or moments. Hao-yi mused that if he kept everyone together, no one else could bother him. He got excited, calling it a brilliant idea. However, Tata quickly shot him down, saying she wouldn't let him do that. Hao-yi couldn't go against the system. Hao-yi didn't care, claiming he enjoyed spending time with the kids. He decided to go out and invite Yuan and the children to paint some landscapes. Tata couldn't understand Hao-yi's behavior. He had previously sworn not to care about Yuan anymore, but now he suddenly wanted to spend time with her and the children. That afternoon, Hao-yi and Yuan went to the children's school to pick them up. Hao-yi invited them to go to the park, and the kids were thrilled, imagining all the butterflies and caterpillars they might see there. As they were crossing the street, a reckless car suddenly hit Yuan. Medical personnel quickly arrived to assist the accident victim and transported her by ambulance to the hospital. Suan was shocked when she received news of the accident. The ambulance sped past a car carrying Zitao and her father. Inside the car, Zitao's father asked if there was anywhere she wanted to visit during the summer vacation. He mentioned that in September, her grandfather would be celebrating his birthday and many prominent guests were expected to attend the party. However, he added that her grandfather had said it might be better if Zitao didn't attend. Zitao's father explained that her grandfather was getting older and probably wouldn't change his perspective on certain things. He apologized for not being able to take her. Zitao replied that she wasn't looking forward to going back to their old home anyway, and that as long as her father was with her, she felt content. She also mentioned that she was already happy that day. Zitao's father apologized again, saying he had caused her a lot of suffering that year, but he promised to make everything better from then on. Zitao noticed how much her father had changed and softened. He told her that all parents deeply love their children. Suddenly, Zitao received news about the accident and rushed to the hospital immediately. Meanwhile, Yujia was still at his office, staring at a photo of himself with Yuan and Xin. One of his employees reminded him to go home, but he insisted on staying. Out of nowhere, the phone rang. Someone informed him that Yuan had been hit by a car and was being rushed to Heizhou Hospital. If Yujia didn't hurry, it might be too late. Panicking, Yujia quickly left his office. The elevator took too long, so he used the emergency stairs. As he rushed down, he recalled Yuan's promise to wait for him until he returned. Determined, Yujia resolved to get there no matter what. Since there were no flights to Heizhou until the next day, Yujia had no choice but to drive there. At the hospital, Suan and Zitao stayed by the patient's side as she was taken to the operating room. The patient was suffering from severe bleeding and needed immediate surgery. Meanwhile, Yujia drove as fast as he could, praying for one more chance with Yuan. While the patient was in surgery, Suan and Zitao anxiously waited outside. When the doctor emerged, they immediately asked about the patient's condition. Around the same time, Yujia arrived at the hospital. He hurriedly asked a nurse about the high school girl who had been hit by a car. He explained that her name was Yuan and that she was his daughter. However, the nurse said there was no record of a patient by that name. She speculated that Yujia might have mistaken her for someone else. Frustrated, Yujia decided to search for her himself. He ran into a doctor who had just finished surgery and asked for Yuwon's location. The doctor directed him to a patient's room, but when Yujia entered, it was empty. Devastated, Yujia broke down, convinced he'd lost the chance to see Yuwon again. As he cried in the empty room, he regretted lying to Yuwon and wished he could apologize. Suddenly, Yuwon appeared, surprised to see Yujia standing before her. Though her memory was foggy, she recognized him as her father. Yuwon ran into Yujia's arms, sobbing. She had waited so long for him, and now he had finally come to see her. Meanwhile, Haoyi began to regain consciousness. It turned out that during the accident, he had managed to push Yuwon out of the way of the speeding car, causing her glasses to fall off. However, Haoyi didn't have time to get out of the car's path himself, and his body was thrown onto the street. Tata managed to stop the car from running over him. Haoyi remembered the incident clearly. Zitao asked if he was awake and whether he still felt any pain. Suan accidentally removed the support bandage on Haoyi's injured leg, causing him to lose consciousness again. Haoyi found himself in another dimension, alone but surrounded by a sense of warmth. Hong and Ming approached him, calling him Dad. They came closer, relieved to see Haoyi was okay. Hong handed Haoyi a drawing she had made of their time together. Haoyi told her it was beautiful. Hong hugged Haoyi and thanked him with all her heart. Hong told Haoyi that they would always miss him. The magical power keeping them there would soon fade, and they would disappear as well. Hong and Ming cried, knowing they had to part ways with Haoyi. Ming asked Haoyi to promise that he and Yuan would live happily from that moment on. Even though Hong and Ming would vanish from the world, they assured Haoyi they would still watch over him and Yuan. With tearful goodbyes, they bid farewell and disappeared. Haoyi woke up, calling out for Yuan. Yuan smiled when she saw Haoyi regain consciousness. Haoyi told her that she looked more beautiful with glasses and promised to buy her a new pair once he recovered. A month passed and Haoyi was finally discharged from the hospital. He was deeply grateful for his recovery. Feeling optimistic, Haoyi stepped outside, certain that good fortune was ahead. However, his first step landed in something unpleasant. He stepped on dog poop. Suddenly, Shili arrived and immediately hugged him tightly. She had come to pick him up, reassuring him that he would be safe with her. Haoyi was annoyed because Shili's overly tight embrace almost sent him back to the hospital. Confused by his reaction, Shili pointed out that she had gone to the hospital specifically for him, yet he seemed ungrateful. Before Haoyi could respond, Zitao showed up, also there to pick him up. Moments later, Suan and Yuan arrived for the same reason. Haoyi couldn't believe his luck, or perhaps misfortune, as the girls approached him. Feeling a sense of impending trouble, Haoyi braced himself. Shili stepped forward, stopping the other three girls from getting closer. She declared that Haoyi was her husband and vowed not to let anyone take him away. Zitao scoffed, pointing out that Haoyi couldn't be her husband because they weren't married. Suan demanded that Shili step aside. Sensing the determination of the other girls, Shili decided to challenge them all. Meanwhile, Haoyi felt that the situation was spiraling out of control and started to back away slowly. Taking advantage of the chaos, Shili managed to distract the other girls and, when they weren't looking, escape with Haoyi in her car. Haoyi was utterly confused about what had just happened. As he tried to comprehend the situation, he realized that Shili's bodyguards had captured him, tied him up, and thrown him into the car. Furious, Haoyi accused Shili of kidnapping him. Shili calmly admitted it without hesitation. Haoyi began shouting for help, calling out Tata's name. Elsewhere, Tata had completed her mission involving Yuan and was now free to take a break. Although she wasn't promoted to the position of a formal love goddess, she was satisfied and looked forward to her time off. Curious about Haoyi, Tata wondered what he might be doing at that moment. Haoyi might seem calm on the surface, but she suspected his heart was deeply moved. Reflecting on the time they had spent together, full of struggles and frustrations, she felt that the beautiful moments outweighed everything else. Love isn't a feeling that can be controlled, but precisely because of that, it holds the power to inspire hope for the future. Just then, Tata noticed a commotion nearby. A crowd was desperately trying to stop a girl from jumping off a building. The girl was yelling angrily, calling Haoyi a jerk. Mai Tata was a love goddess training, and due to her magical mistake, a student named Haoyi ended up with romantic troubles involving the girls at his school. To atone for her mistake, she had to stay close to Haoyi and uncover the big dreams of each girl to erase the effects of her magic. Tata loved snacks, and at that moment, she was at a supermarket looking for her favorite treats. Suddenly, a little boy saw her and ran toward her. He accidentally tripped over Tata's clothes and almost fell, but Tata quickly froze time to save him. She helped the boy and then grabbed some snacks from the shelf before placing a swimming ring around his waist. When time resumed, Tata had already disappeared from the supermarket, leaving the boy safely landing on the ground. Confused, the boy tried to process what had just happened and realized the fairy he had seen was gone. As Tata walked along the street, she noticed a couple arguing. She decided to bring peace and love back to their relationship. However, the magic she cast accidentally shocked the man so badly that he was left scorched. She tried casting another spell, but it backfired again, and the girl left the man entirely. Tata couldn't understand why her magic kept failing. Meanwhile, Zitao was being chauffeured to Hao Yi's house. She was hopeful that Hao Yi would be happy to see her. At the same time, Suan was running toward Hao Yi's place, and Shili was also heading there. Shili, remembering how Hao Yi had escaped when she had locked him in a room before, vowed to make sure he couldn't get away this time so she could take care of him for the rest of his life. On her way, Shili crossed paths with Suan. Recognizing Suan as the girl who had flirted with Hao Yi during the animation festival, Shili asked if Suan was also heading to see Hao Yi. Zitao then arrived and greeted both Suan and Shili, acknowledging them as Hao Yi's childhood friends. Shili didn't see Zitao as a threat because Zitao seemed to approve of her relationship with Hao Yi. She even asked for Zitao's name and casually referred to her as a friend. Just then, Yuan appeared, noting how crowded Hao Yi's house had become. Zitao asked if Yuan was also there to see Hao Yi. Yuan replied that Hao Yi had gotten hurt saving her, so of course she had to visit him. Hearing this, the three other girls immediately felt defeated. The group prepared to enter the house, but they suddenly heard sounds from inside. Sounds of Hao Yi groaning in pain. Alarmed, Shili kicked down the door. Inside, they were shocked to see Hao Yi disheveled, sweating profusely and breathing heavily. The girls assumed Hao Yi had been engaging in something inappropriate with Zheng Dong. Hao Yi quickly tried to explain that it wasn't what it looked like, but Tato snapped a photo, accusing Hao Yi of heading toward the gay gateway. Zheng Dong attempted to clarify, saying that he and Hao Yi weren't doing anything suspicious. Shili, however, immediately threw a knife at Zheng Dong, narrowly missing him. Zheng Dong explained that he had only been applying ointment to Hao Yi. Zitao asked if Hao Yi had rejected her because he actually liked men. Yuan then questioned why Hao Yi wasn't saying anything. Hao Yi wanted to explain but was cut off when Suan angrily hit him. She called Hao Yi a pervert, saying he was even worse than she had thought. Shili, annoyed that Suan had struck Hao Yi, swung her sword at Suan. However, Suan's large chest managed to block the attack. Feeling the softness of Suan's chest, Shili began to wonder if Hao Yi preferred girls with large breasts like Suan. To calm the situation, Hao Yi handed them water, but it was clear that Suan and Shili dislike each other. Yuan then mentioned that she had made soup for Hao Yi. Unbeknownst to her, the other three girls had also prepared soup for him. Hao Yi could already imagine the suffering he'd endure from being forced to eat all their soups. Shili proudly declared that she had made rib bone soup with berries. Not to be outdone, Suan boasted that she had prepared pork liver and spinach soup, which was excellent for replenishing blood and promoting good health. Zitao said she didn't know much, but she had only made seafood soup. When she opened her dish, it looked incredibly luxurious, featuring abalone and shark fins. The girls were amazed by Zitao's extravagant creation. Yuan remarked that if this were a test, they had all failed. After a fracture, eating high-protein food is not ideal because it burdens the digestive system. Instead, what's needed are fiber-rich vegetables and fruits, making a soup of fibers, vegetables, and tofu the perfect combination. The girls argued about whose food Hao Yi should eat. Toto and Yuan, Hao Yi's neighbors, came over asking about the delicious aroma they had smelled. Hao Yi then had an idea. He stopped the girls' argument by claiming he had already eaten all the soups. Hao Yi hurried to change his clothes, asking Zheng Dong for help. It turned out that Tato, Yuan, and Zheng Dong had eaten all the soups under the table. While choosing clothes for Hao Yi, Zheng Dong commented on how terrifying Hao Yi's harem was, even dragging him into its chaos. Zheng Dong advised Hao Yi not to think too much about others and said that Shili worried him the most. As he helped Hao Yi button his shirt, Zheng Dong asked if Hao Yi had lost his feelings for Shili. Hao Yi replied that he never said that. However, Zheng Dong knew Hao Yi had liked Shili since they were kids. Hao Yi admitted it was true but clarified that it was all in the past. Zheng Dong then asked why Hao Yi didn't accept Shili, who genuinely loved him. Hao Yi said he didn't want to be a backup option in Shili's eyes. He then asked Zheng Dong to wait for him outside. As Hao Yi got dressed, he started reminiscing about Shili from their childhood until now. Suddenly, a pile of snacks fell on Hao Yi. It was Tata, who had arrived crying. She explained that she had tried to help a couple make up but ended up ruining their relationship instead. Shili overheard a woman's voice from Hao Yi's room and, furious, assumed Hao Yi was hiding another girl inside. She stormed into his room, her eyes scanning every corner, demanding that Hao Yi bring out the woman he was hiding. Shocked, Hao Yi stammered that he didn't know what Shi Li was talking about. As Shi Li searched his closet, Hao Yi desperately tried to cover Tata with the snacks. Shi Li insisted she had heard him talking to someone. Hao Yi denied it, claiming it was probably just Tata's imagination. Soon Zitao, Suan, and Yuan entered Hao Yi's room. Suan accused him of hiding a girl there. Hao Yi insisted it was all a misunderstanding and invited them to sit down and eat some candy while he explained. Unfortunately for Hao Yi, the girls were already angry, and Shi Li alone was enough to cause him trouble, let alone adding 3 more to the mix. Shi Li threatened to cut out Hao Yi's tongue if he lied. The girls kept pressuring him to reveal the truth, but Hao Yi maintained that there was no girl hidden in his room. Suddenly, Shi Li noticed Tata's scarf and questioned him about it. Tata realized she was in danger and decided to reveal herself, flying into the room in front of everyone. Tata tried to use her magic to freeze time, but instead, she accidentally changed the girls' outfits into dresses. Panicking, Tata tried again, but this time she transformed their clothes into anime costumes, sexy outfits, and even bikinis. To make things worse, Hao Yi seemed to enjoy the spectacle. Suan immediately slapped Hao Yi, calling him a pervert. Tata started crying because her magic had failed, but luckily, she managed to regain control and made everyone forget what had just happened. Hao Yi asked if Tata's powers were out of control because she'd eaten too much. Tata retorted that eating was a basic need for life and blamed Hao Yi instead for not resolving the issues caused by the chocolate cake. If the situation dragged on, her magic powers would weaken, and she might end up turning into a regular human. As Hao Yi was about to leave, he suddenly heard someone mention his name on TV. It was Sandy, a famous idol singer who had been performing since childhood and had gained significant fame in recent years. Hao Yi couldn't even recall if he knew her. Perhaps she was talking about some other Hao Yi. Suddenly, petals started falling, transporting Hao Yi to another dimension. There, Hao Yi and Tata saw Sandy approaching, singing as she arrived. Sandy greeted Hao Yi and asked why he hadn't invited her to play, so she had decided to come and see him herself. Hao Yi was bewildered, not understanding how Sandy even knew him. Tata speculated that Sandy might have eaten the magical chocolate as well. That chocolate could make people's dreams come true, which explained how Sandy had gained magical powers too. Hao Yi was overwhelmed, thinking about all the chaos he had faced so far: fake pregnancies, married life, children, and now a magical idol singer. Sandy smiled at Hao Yi and explained that she had discovered a path to the dream world. Hao Yi asked what kind of person he was in Sandy's memory. Sandy described him as an angel, her one true soulmate, and the person she trusted most in the world. To her, Hao Yi was also her emotional anchor, the one she wanted to share her dream world with, a place free from loneliness and sadness. Sandy led Hao Yi to a rooftop. Terrified, Hao Yi worried she might ask him to jump. Tata warned him not to get provoked, reminding him that Sandy was under the influence of the chocolate's magic. Tata urged Hao Yi to go along with Sandy for now. Hao Yi extended his hand to Sandy, who smiled warmly and took it. She flew into the air with Hao Yi, bringing him into her dream world. Sandy invited Hao Yi to her fantasy world, a place free from loneliness and sadness. Hao Yi initially thought he was going to fall, but instead, Sandy took him flying with her. However, she suddenly let go of him and Hao Yi began falling. Just as he was about to hit the ground, a giant paper airplane appeared, carrying them both as they soared freely through the sky. The fantasy world was full of wonders, with various animals floating in the sky. Hao Yi felt like he'd fallen down a rabbit hole. Tata laughed and teased him, saying he'd been reading too many fairy tales. She added that Hao Yi wasn't a rabbit and Sandy wasn't the white rabbit. Annoyed, Hao Yi snapped at Tata, frustrated that she was mocking him even after he'd almost died. Tata confidently assured him that he couldn't possibly die since they were in Sandy's home and Hao Yi was very important to her. Hao Yi asked Sandy again about their relationship. Sandy found it strange that Hao Yi had forgotten. They had been lovers since childhood and Hao Yi had always been there for her. Sandy reminded him that he was the one who had inspired her and encouraged her to become a star. He had supported her when no one else believed in her. Hao Yi suspected Sandy might have confused him with someone else. However, Sandy insisted that Hao Yi was the one who had held her up when she was weak. She hugged him tightly, saying she had come so far because of him. Sandy took Hao Yi flying again and dropped him onto the grass. Tata quickly checked on him, asking if he was okay. Hao Yi joked that he felt like he had died. Tata warned him that if he didn't do something soon, Sandy would inevitably take him to another dimension. Hao Yi was stunned to learn that the tree in the fantasy world was actually a gateway to another dimension. He asked if Cupid's chocolate was truly so powerful that it could create anything, even alternate worlds. Tata explained that Sandy's magic could turn her imagination into reality, and the universe itself was full of dimensions. According to Tata, love goddesses existed across the universe, and because humans have love, it was the goddesses' mission to help humans fulfill their dreams and find love. This had been their purpose for thousands of years. If Sandy's dream was to escape to another world, it wasn't surprising that the chocolate's magic had made it possible. Sandy invited Hao Yi to join her in the fantasy world. Hao Yi hesitated, fearing he might lose his humanity. However, he didn't know what Sandy would do if he rejected her. Thinking quickly, Hao Yi suggested they grab some ice cream together. As they talked, Sandy pointed out a massive mushroom in the sky. Hao Yi laughed, explaining that it was just a jellyfish from an aquarium. Hearing this, Sandy immediately conjured a gigantic aquarium around them. Hao Yi was shocked to find himself submerged in the aquarium, realizing he could actually breathe underwater. Sandy's world was breathtakingly beautiful, but it was also lonely. There was no one else in Sandy's world and nothing there could be shared. When Sandy saw dolphins, she wanted to take them into her fantasy world. Hao Yi quickly stopped her, warning that the dolphins cared deeply for their caretaker, who had raised them since birth and whom they considered their mother. Hao Yi feared the dolphins would be heartbroken if Sandy separated them from their mother. However, Sandy dismissed his concerns, saying she would become their new mother. Hao Yi told Sandy she couldn't be selfish and accused her of not considering others' feelings. Sandy then asked Hao Yi if he felt the same as the dolphins, that he didn't want to leave his current world. She asked if he would come with her to the fantasy world, but Hao Yi was unable to answer. Sandy became upset, and suddenly, her world lost its vibrant colors. Concerned that his words had caused her sadness, Hao Yi quickly suggested they go to the fantasy world together tomorrow. Hearing this, Sandy smiled again. As Hao Yi was walking home, Tata asked why he had decided to go to the fantasy world tomorrow. Hao Yi remained silent, and Tata wondered if he was planning to ignore Sandy and leave her all alone. Tata warned Hao Yi not to bring Sandy into the fantasy world, because if he did, Sandy's physical body would die in the real world. She explained that Sandy's body was in a coma at the hospital, and what Hao Yi was meeting was just Sandy's soul. If her soul passed through the dimensional door, her body in the real world would die. Hao Yi already knew about this, but Tata was shocked that Hao Yi didn't seem to care about Sandy's death. She knew Hao Yi wasn't the kind of person to just ignore something like that. Hao Yi had seen the world Sandy created, and it was perfect, without a single failure. Hao Yi had thought it was because Sandy's heart was pure and beautiful, unlike the real world, which was full of cruelty and ugliness. But when he thought about it more deeply, he realized that Sandy's desire to leave everything behind in the real world and choose the fantasy world instead was because there was something about her life that she couldn't express, something that was less beautiful than what she showed. Without understanding everything, it would be impossible to keep her in the real world. Hao Yi assured Tata that he wasn't going to ignore Sandy, he just needed some time. He promised he would think of what to do for her that night. Later that evening, Hao Yi thought about it while he was taking a shower. He was startled when he returned to his room and saw Sandy lying on his bed. Hao Yi asked why Sandy had come without telling him beforehand. He felt embarrassed because he hadn't put his clothes on yet. Sandy said she wasn't going to look. Hao Yi was surprised. Sandy's way of thinking was so different from that of ordinary humans. Hao Yi asked why Sandy had come to see him that night when they were going to meet the next day. It turned out that Sandy just wanted to give him a gift, a song she had written for him. She explained that she was able to write it without the help of an agent, all because of the inspiration Hao Yi had given her. She thanks him for always supporting her. Hao Yi didn't want to accept the gift, thinking it was too precious for him. But Sandy insisted she wouldn't take it back, saying she would write more songs after going to the fantasy world, where she would have countless listeners without any limits and her life would be free. Hao Yi believed that Sandy would have many fans, but he knew he wouldn't be one of them. He understood that she wouldn't visit him anymore. Suddenly, Tata appeared and said that Sandy couldn't wait until tomorrow. Would they just let Sandy die? Tata certainly couldn't let her client die by suicide. She asked Hao Yi to think of a way to save Sandy. Hao Yi mentioned that he had a method, but it might go against the love goddess's rules, and he was afraid it might hurt Tata. Tata was willing to take the risk, saying that if she didn't solve the problem between Hao Yi and Sandy, her mission wouldn't be complete and she would lose her magic powers. So Tata decided to bet on Hao Yi's method and agreed to it. Hao Yi met Sandy near the tree that served as the entrance to the fantasy world. Sandy immediately hugged him, thinking Hao Yi had changed his mind. However, that wasn't the case. Hao Yi had come to take her back. He hoped Sandy wouldn't go to the fantasy world and asked her to come back. But Sandy, of course, refused. She didn't want to return to the real world. Hao Yi asked why Sandy didn't like living in the real world. Did she not like being limited? And if so, who was limiting her? Meanwhile, her agent, Agent Wang, and Sandy's mother, Lu Jie, were watching Sandy's condition at the hospital. Wang complained about the cost of Sandy's treatment, saying that if she didn't wake up soon, it would be useless. However, Lu Jie believed that Sandy would surely wake up. Hao Yi told Sandy that the fantasy world wasn't as pure and beautiful as she believed. It was also filled with darkness and ugliness. Sandy responded, saying that it was only temporary. Yi explained that the fantasy world also had its ugliness, because beauty and ugliness were like two sides of a coin. They would always coexist, no matter where Sandy went. If Sandy enjoyed the beauty, she would also see the ugliness, and she would start thinking that the fantasy world never existed. Meanwhile, Sandy's body in the hospital began to stir, and Ji cried out, calling for a doctor. Sandy couldn't believe what Yi had just said. After all, Yi had always supported her. Feeling frustrated, Sandy ran off to enter the fantasy world. Yi chased after her, trying to stop her, but before he could reach her, Sandy had already stepped through the door to the fantasy world, and the door collapsed before Yi could grab her. Sandy's memories began to rewind to when she was a child and befriended a young boy. Sandy ran as fast as she could toward the door to the fantasy world, asking Yi not to follow her. Upon entering, Yi was shocked by the dark scenery inside. Sandy hadn't expected her final refuge to look so different from what she had imagined. Yi wondered if his words had influenced Sandy into imagining such a dark world. If this world was shaped by Sandy's imagination, then it could potentially be controlled. Yi approached Sandy, who was crying, and told her that he knew how to escape this place, but she had to trust him and keep his secret. Sandy agreed. They started fresh with introductions. Yi shared his name and hobbies, explaining how he often found himself in absurd situations that were nothing but trouble. He told her about meeting a girl from a complicated family, where she never felt the love of her parents. He also shared stories about other girls he had met, each with their own struggles. One girl had a deep connection to people but didn't seem bound to the world. So to protect her, he hid his romantic side, making himself appear strong, even if it meant being misunderstood. Another girl felt neglected by her father and longed for a warm family. All these girls had their lives changed by one thing: the goddess of love. Sandy saw a vision of the goddess of love herself. Yi explained that it was because of the goddess of love that he was able to meet these girls. Her magic had allowed these girls to overcome their challenges. Yi then remarked that the world isn't perfect and everyone has their own fears and sadness, but no one loses hope entirely. He even suggested that Sandy meet the goddess of love, but Sandy decided to go back with Yi and get to know the goddess so she could experience extraordinary happiness. For Sandy, the most important thing was to live alongside Yi. Sandy tried to kiss Yi, but he dodged and said that for now, they should focus on figuring out how to leave this place. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, they returned to their original location. Yi already had a plan in mind for Sandy. To execute the plan, Yi needed Yuan's help to write a big news story. He then asked Zitao to post it on Weibo, a Chinese social media platform, and Tiba, China's largest BBS. Zitao mobilized her team, and soon Sandy's story became a trending topic. Netizens felt sorry for Sandy, who had been in a coma for so long and neglected by her agency. They poured in their support for her. While the news was the center of attention, Yi used Suan's popularity to gather Sandy's fans on campus. Suan incited them to protest against the agency. The news outlets soon covered the demonstrations by Sandy's fans outside the company headquarters. TV reporters tried to contact Sandy's agency, but there was no response. Tata appeared before Yi and praised his ability to handle everything so effortlessly. Yi said it wasn't enough. Besides wanting Sandy to wake up, he also wanted her life to have meaning. The first step of the plan was successful, and now was Yi's turn to take action. He invited Tata to meet Sandy's childhood love. Along the way, Ji overheard people discussing how Sandy's freedom was being restricted by her agency. Ji quickly tried to avoid the situation, claiming he had nothing to do with Sandy's story. Yi caught Ji and asked if he knew Sandy. Ji denied it at first, but when Yi showed him a photo of them together, he finally admitted the truth. Ji revealed that he and Sandy were neighbors and childhood friends, but they had lost touch long ago. Yi told him that he wasn't a reporter but a friend of Sandy's, and he pointed out how Ji had hurt her. Ji revealed that he had been forced to live with Sandy for so long that he felt like he had no life or future of his own. He claimed that it was Sandy who had hurt him. Yi countered, saying that Ji's betrayal was the reason Sandy wanted to leave this world. Ji admitted he was wrong for handling things poorly, insisting he never intended to hurt Sandy but simply didn't know what to do. Yi asked Ji to share his past with Sandy to help her. Ji explained that ever since they were kids, Sandy had peculiar thoughts that made other children avoid playing with her. Since Sandy was his neighbor, Ji had to look after her. Despite her quirks, Sandy loved singing and had a simple nature. Ji genuinely hoped Sandy could show her talent to the world, so he encouraged her to join competitions and helped her find opportunities to pursue her dreams. His efforts paid off and Sandy became a star. However, she stopped attending school and Ji had to become her private tutor. Due to her unique personality, her agency forbade her from socializing or making friends, which made Ji the only person she trusted. Ji's classmates mocked him, calling him the only friend of the weird girl Sandy. isolating him socially. Sandy's agency, led by Wang, paid Lu Ji to keep encouraging Sandy to work, claiming that her innocence was her selling point. Lu Ji felt uncomfortable with the arrangement and began doing everything with a fake smile. Over time, Sandy's life became increasingly restricted and detached from the outside world. Her agency even rejected the songs she wrote, leaving her unaware of social media and limiting her understanding of the world. Their lives turned into one big lie, to the point where Lu Ji didn't know who he really was anymore. One day, Wang proposed extending Lu Ji's contract to continue taking care of Sandy. Lu Ji's mother agreed, but Lu Ji refused. After 10 years of taking care of Sandy, he was exhausted and wanted to live his own life. Unbeknownst to them, Sandy overheard their conversation. Later, Hao Yi confronted Wang and played a recording of Lu Ji's interrogation. Wang showed no interest in explaining himself and dismissed Hao Yi's concerns about Sandy. Instead, Wang accused Hao Yi of orchestrating the online news against him. Hao Yi threatened to expose Wang online about Sandy's mistreatment, but Wang brushed it off. Just then, Wang received a call informing him that Lu Ji had visited Sandy's mother and signed a contract to have Sandy quit being a singer. Wang ordered his staff to calm the situation and ended the call. He turned to Hao Yi, questioning if this was also part of his plan, and even offered Hao Yi money to drop the matter. Hao Yi rejected the offer and demanded that Wang grant Sandy the freedom to have friends and the life she desired. Wang dismissed the idea, calling Sandy weird and claiming that as a big star, she should appreciate leaving behind just one friend. Hao Yi argued that Wang had trapped Sandy, packaging her in a way that made her seem dazzling to fans but far from her true self. Continuing to do so, Hao Yi warned would only cause her more pain. Wang coldly remarked that stars come and go in the music industry and questioned what Hao Yi could do if Wang truly followed through with his threats to exploit Sandy to the last drop. Wang attempted to leave, but Hao Yi stopped him, this time threatening him with compromising photos of Wang with another woman. Hao Yi also revealed that he knew Wang's legal wife worked as a manager at his company. Stunned, Wang had no choice but to listen. He couldn't comprehend how a high school student like Hao Yi could manage to corner him. Meanwhile, Zitao was overjoyed that she had accomplished what Hao Yi had asked of her. She wondered if Hao Yi would reward her later. Suddenly, her phone alarm went off, reminding her of her grandfather's birthday. Unsure of what to do, she hesitated. At the same time, the news broke on TV that Sandy had woken up from her coma and was healthy again. Reporters scrambled to interview her, but Sandy became aggressive, throwing objects at anyone who got in her way. She approached the camera and shouted directly into it, demanding that Hao Yi come to see her immediately.